Hey everyone, I'm Alan Schimmel, and you're watching TechStrong TV. Today's Monday, November 23rd. It's Thanksgiving week for us in the U.S. here. I hope wherever you are, you're well and safe and healthy. It's going to be a short week for us. We'll do today and tomorrow's show, and then we'll take the rest of the week off from TechStrong TV. We've been running hard now for months, and actually the whole team here can use a day of rest. You know, speaking of the whole team, I don't know how many of you stayed to the bitter end of the show where we run our credits, but we thank in the credits, my executive producer here, Paul Gustafson, VP video production at Media Ops, is here every day filming this and editing. Paul's joined by a great team of video editors and audio folks, Brian Yaskulka, Andy Weiner, Charlene O'Hanlon, our managing editor and Chief Content Officer, contributes every day, as does Mitch Ashley from Accelerated Strategies Group, Mike Vizard from Channel Roundup, and everyone else our guests and everything. It is Thanksgiving week. It's a time to give thanks, and thanks to all of them for making this show what it is. We started it in March as an idea. And here we are, 116 or something, 118 shows in. So thank you. And thank you, our audience, for watching, because without you guys watching it, we wouldn't be doing it. Anyway, let me tell you what we've got in store today. We've got a new company to introduce you to, Grid Dynamics. They're not new. They're just new to our show. Grid Dynamics, we have Ilya Katsov, who's their chief head of data science. And he's going to talk to us a lot about AI, how it's being adopted, and kind of AI kind of solutions we're seeing around data science. Next up, as part of our coverage of KubeCon from last week, we have Animesh Singh from IBM. Animesh is the chief architect data and AI open source at IBM. And he's going to talk to us about a bunch of announcements at KubeCon that IBM made. And it's around Kubeflow pipelines, Tekton, OpenShift, and even Watson. So just one building on the other. I think you're going to enjoy what Animesh says. Then after that, we have this week's episode of the Cyber Hero Adventures with our host, producer Gary Berman. Gary's show this week is with PwC, and he has Sean Joyce, Global and U.S. Cybersecurity, Privacy, and Forensics leader, and Dr. Denise Cagular, Strategy, and Emily Steff, Cybersecurity, Privacy, and Forensics Integrated Solutions leader. So it's a great panel Gary has together, and I think it's going to be a good one. After that, wow, we have a double barrel of video shows for you today. I have a new DevOps Unbound episode, and this one is around accessibility and usability design, especially in a DevOps workflow. And we're joined by Sean Kelly from Tricentis, Paul Pickney from Swiss Log Healthcare, and I can't really tell right now, Paula Goins from Launch Darkly. So that's a good one, and I think you'll enjoy that. After that, we're going to turn things over to Charlene O'Hanlon. And Charlene, our producer, Charlene is our executive. What is Charlene? Charlene is our chief content officer, as well as our managing editor. It's Thanksgiving week, folks. Bear with me. And Charlene will have the news from around the media ops world today, as well as an interview with Chris Kennedy of Attack IQ on ransomware, which is still rearing its ugly head. And then Charlene will also have a great preview of the webinars. We don't have that many this week, but I think we're going to run into next week's as well. So stay tuned for that. Then we're going to head over to the Analyst Corner with Mitch. Mitch has actually before Mitch, I think we're going to run with Mike Vizard, an episode of Channel Roundup. And Mike has a good show today on IBM Container Security. He's going to chat with Brandon Lum, technical lead for the Cloud Native Computing Foundation and IBM researcher. That should be a good one. Then we're going to head over to the analyst corner with Mitch Ashley. And Mitchell has some good commentary and video, as usual. And I'll be back to wrap things up. That's it for Monday of Thanksgiving week. Let's go to our commercial, and we'll be back with Ilya Katsov. All right, up first today, actually, from Grid Dynamics, Ilya Katsov, who's their head of data science. Bright guy. He's going to talk to us about AI and some of the way it's being used and how Grid Dynamics is kind of leading the charge there. So here's Ilya Katsov of Grid Dynamics.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us on another segment here for TechStrong TV. Our guest this segment is from a company we haven't featured before, so I'm really looking forward to introducing him and the company to you, our audience. Let me welcome Ilya Katsov of Grid Dynamics. Ilya, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Hello. Hi, everyone.
So, Ilya, as I mentioned, I don't think we've featured Grid Dynamics on our show before. And I quite frankly, I don't know if many in our audience are familiar. So why don't we start off, maybe if you don't mind, give us a little background on Grid Dynamics, what you do, a little of the company background, and maybe you could tell us a little of your own background as well.
Yes, absolutely. Grid Dynamics, we are a data science and engineering services consulting company, and we are in business since 2006. We started originally with a charter to help large enterprises, large companies to use emerging technologies, innovative technologies. And in 2006, it was mainly around distributed compute, term public cloud, it was not even around. And even, technology companies, they just experimented with this technology. They used to build what is currently known as private clouds, computational grids, and we started to work with companies like Microsoft, PayPal, eBay, helping them to do this complex engineering around distributed compute, around computational grids, and so on. And this is like company was called Grid Dynamics. The name cloud was not even around at that time. And then we started to expand in other industries, and fortunately in around 2010, 2012, it was a time then many retail companies started to rethink how they do online business because they recognized the necessity to compete with Amazon and so on. So they started to invest significantly into building the e-commerce ecosystems, into the e-commerce applications, and it was also time then people start to adopt big data paradigm. They started to invest into distributed data collection, building data processing capabilities, and so on. And we recognized that we can help these companies as well using our capabilities in and knowledge and experience in building highly scalable computational grids. And we started to work with many large retail companies and technology companies, manufacturing companies, helping them to build their e-commerce ecosystems, helping them to build data engineering capabilities, to establish their data lakes, to start systematically collect their customer data and transactional data, and so on. And then at some point, we recognized that there is a lot of need in processing this data, in optimizing business decisions using this data. There is a huge gap between collecting data and actually optimizing business processes, optimizing business decisions based on that. And it took us to data science, to artificial intelligence, how we can combine statistical modeling with decision sciences, with process automation and decision automation to actually close this gap and to make companies operate more efficiently, optimize their marketing processes, optimize their price management processes, inventory management processes, and so on. And I'm working with Grid Dynamics for quite a long time. Prior to that, I used to work actually in hardware engineering. I used to work in Intel research on hardware engineering and mathematical modeling. Then I joined Grid Dynamics. I used to work with our data engineering practice for quite a long time, helping many clients to establish their capabilities and deliver projects in this area. And then I essentially headed this effort to get into decision automation, process optimization space using data science. And this is what I'm currently doing.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. I'm listening to you, Ilya, and I'm thinking back, true story. Before I did DevOps.com and MediaOps, I was in venture-backed startups. Company I helped start back in 2001, right before even 2006. We named the company Lattice Networks, like a lattice, sort of a framework, because we saw there was no public cloud to speak of then, but we saw that the distributed application was going to be the future. And that these distributed applications would live in multiple locations and all over, but they were going to need some sort of central management. And that, this was going to be the future. Of course, Lattice Networks, we wound up pivoting once, how it is when you raise money and everything. And it became still secure because we wound up just focusing on the security of those distributed applications, not on managing the application itself. But, the lesson there is that, the more you go on, the best laid plans of mice and men change with the market and with technology and what, what it dictates. So, you started almost, at the birth of public cloud around then. And here we are today talking about, I mean, it's kind of taken for granted already, but, now we have automation, AI, and all of these kinds of new technologies that almost, if I would have asked the Grid Dynamics folks in 2006, I don't know if you would have guessed that's where it is at this point, right? So, it's interesting how things work, how technology kind of dictates all of this. But anyway, talk to us a little bit about what's happening now, Ilya. You mentioned some of it at Grid Dynamics. Obviously we're all living in a very unusual, to say the least, time frame with what's going on with the COVID and pandemic and how that's affected things. But it's also, again, it's created new dynamics, new pressures, opportunities for organizations who need to exist and continue operating in this. So how has the company sort of responded to that?
There are several different ways how pandemics impacted operations of enterprises. Obviously, from my perspective, from our perspective, since we are focusing on decision automation and operational excellence and so on, of course, one of the significant aspects of that was that many forecasting capabilities were disrupted by pandemics. I mean, forecasting capabilities in supply chain management and price management, even in consumer experience personalization, right? And many companies actually had to urgently to make adjustments to their forecasting models, to their predictive models, and rethink the whole approach how they deal with that. because there are, all this pandemic, it was just like a sequence of very short and very short term and very frequent changes, because we had lockdown in the beginning, then companies, and this was one operational mode, then companies started to think how they can go out of lockdown once reopening, for example, of stores will start, and they needed to adjust their workforce optimization models, how they, for example, deploy store associates in stores, and how they optimize that. And then this process still continues, because this is not like it's called new norm, but it's not really a normal operational mode. They cannot use historical data to optimize current decisions, right? And it was quite challenging to navigate through all these different stages of disruption. And I think that with our clients, we did quite a lot of interesting and unusual things to address these problems. For example, for some companies, we use like international data from countries like China and Europe that entered pandemics in relatively early stages, comparing to United States, to get some idea about patterns and incorporate this into forecasting. For some companies, we use some proxy data, for example, data about macroeconomic disruption of 2008, because it was probably the nearest relevant case, something comparable to the current pandemic. For some other companies, we actually used information about the number of influenza cases as a proxy to the number of COVID cases, and use these different signals to fix forecasting models and to fine-tune optimization models for supply chain, for workforce management, and so on to this new reality. So this is one of the interesting aspects, because many companies, they had to go really innovative with regard to how they fix their optimization forecasting processes and what kind of data they use, how they use some innovative data that they would not normally use, and so on.
Absolutely. Yeah, what else is occurs to me is, non-COVID times, regular times. I think people have grown comfortable sort of outsourcing the kind of, data gathering and analysis that Grid Dynamics does for them. But during COVID, do you think there's been a greater reliance on relying on your data and analysis, because with everything going on and the pressure, everyone's remote, but we still got to get stuff done. It's more acute, the need for this analysis, for this automation, for this sort of higher, faster, better data analysis and intelligence is really the word I'm looking for.
Yes, and I think there are several different things here. First of all, there is like a long-term overall trend that towards decision automation across all industries, because I think it would be fair to say that over the last 30 or 40 years, typically most companies and most industries, they were focusing on process automation, right? They were focusing on building applicational infrastructure that helped them to automate processes and connect, different operational functions within the enterprise using IT systems, right? But over the last 5 years, or maybe a little bit more, the focus, I think, shifts towards decision automation, right? The companies starting to think how they can make more automated, more intelligent decisions. And of course, this is an ongoing trend, and pandemic, I think it does not change it at all, right? And maybe it's even increased the necessity for this decision automation, because the competition, for example, in digital space, it's intensifies, and companies need to make more real-time, more personalized decisions and so on, all across the different areas, starting with customer experience to price management to supply chain management, pretty much everything, right? So this is one aspect. Another aspect, as you stated, is pandemic itself. And one of the challenges in the pandemic was that companies needed to react very quickly on these challenges, right? Because once we entered pandemic, it was just a few weeks before the lockdown, and lockdown it was also just maybe a couple of months, and then reopening started, and so on. And this is very different from the typical cadence for data science projects and for analytics. But typically, these projects they take months of time and so on. And obviously, companies they needed to work with consulting companies in many cases to rapidly deploy teams that are experienced in solving these types of problems and scale out their internal capabilities or complement their capabilities using external expertise. So that's for sure. At least these two trends are, I think, very relevant to the question that you asked.
Agreed. Let's hope we get back to a normal soon. Ilya, believe it or not, we're just about out of time. It goes, as I said, quickly here. Any other kind of information from Grid Dynamics, what you guys are doing right now that you want to share with the audience?
Well, we, as I mentioned in the beginning, over our history, we evolved with the industry, and we are not like shifting from one area to another. We started with distributed compute and cloud, and we still do a lot of work, and this trend is still there because it evolves by itself, and this is still an important area of expertise for us. Then we move to data engineering, and this area continues to develop and to grow, and then data science. And artificial intelligence is a relatively new trend that many companies in the industry are trying to embrace. So I think overall it's important for companies to watch these priorities and to understand how these trends are moving over time. And all across the industries we see that different companies are in different stages of their journey. Some of them are still focused on establishing, let's say, cloud capabilities. Some of them already did that and moved to decision automation and their digital transformation journeys. So it's very interesting to watch all these trends, and definitely, we have a lot of expertise all across the board in these areas, and I'm quite happy that over the last 10 years or so.
For sure. Yeah. Ilya, you know what we did? We never even gave the website out. For people who want to get more information, where did they go?
They go to griddynamics.com.
Easy. Grid Dynamics, just the way it's pronounced. Okay. Ilya Katsov, thanks for being our guest today on TechStrong TV. Keep up the great stuff. Come back, keep us posted on what's happening. Okay?
Yep, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. This is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. We'll be right back with another guest.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
A lot of news coming out of KubeCon last week, some of it from IBM. They built a whole foundational thing here of announcements around their use of, ultimately it really is around Kubeflow pipelines, but it's about adoption of Tekton with it, building it into OpenShift and the IBM cloud, and then using Watson for AI capabilities and everything else. So it's an interesting set of announcements. Animesh Singh, who is the chief architect for data and AI open source from IBM, joins us to talk to us about it. I think you're going to like the interview. Here it is.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us here on another segment for TechStrong TV. You know, with KubeCon coming up, or KubeCon taking place, of course, a lot of news around Kubernetes, around cloud native, and stuff like that. IBM has several announcements that they've been making, and I wanted to have someone on who can help us, you know, make heads and tails of these announcements and explain why you should care and why it's important. So I'm happy to introduce you to Animesh Singh. Animesh, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Thanks for having me here, Alan. Yeah.
My pleasure. So Animesh, I'm going to let you kind of introduce yourself, your background, position at IBM, and then let's jump into what the announcements were or are.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Alan. Yeah, so I've been with IBM for more than a decade. You know, I wouldn't go into the whole history of, you know, what I've done, but, you know, a large part of my career has been around cloud, right? So I've been in the forefront of IBM cloud innovations around the private cloud, the public cloud, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service. And for the last, 4 to 5 years, I've been doing a lot of work around data and AI space, working very closely with Watson. Obviously, you know, a lot of our strategy is essentially cloud as a base, and that becomes, you know, Kubernetes as a base. Coming forward, you know, with the Red Hat acquisition, OpenShift has become a big part of our portfolio. And building data and AI platforms on top of that OpenShift portfolio is the core charter, right? Now, as we are doing this, again, one of the things, right, which IBM already had in its DNA was a very strong open source culture. And OpenShift, you know, further came and amplified it, right? So a large part of our, data and AI portfolio, when we look at, you know, what Watson does, what IBM Cloud Platform Data does, right, we are increasingly making it more open source centric. So that's, you know, what I've been doing. I'm the chief architect for data and AI open source platform in IBM in a group called CODE, Center for Open Source Data and AI Technologies. Work very closely with Watson Cloud Platform Data team, or IBM Cloud and OpenShift teams in terms of creating these AI solutions on top of it. Now, one of the trends which we have been noticing recently, in fact, you know, for the last 2 years, there is a growing trend towards MLOps, right? And what it means is that, you know, more and more machine learning models need to be deployed in production, right? The technologies and the compute power to actually create these models have increased manifolds. So more and more models are being created, but, you know, when it is coming to the point where the rubber meets the road, when you need to deploy these models in production, there are a lot of, manual handoffs. There are a lot of, essentially problems towards monitoring how to automate the CI/CD lifecycle, how to take, a base model, run distributed training, then, how to make sure that distributed training is under the covers using the GPUs efficiently. Finally, you have run distributed training. You probably, are using hyperparameter optimization. Then you want to validate those models. Finally, you want to deploy your models in production. But the difference is, unlike in applications world, models are not stationary. And what I want to say is that, once you deploy an application, and for the next 6 months, if you're not touching it, you're guaranteed that for the same input, your application is going to give you the same output. Not so with the models, right? You might have the same input 2 weeks later to the same model, but it might give you a different output because it's constantly learning and improving itself. What happens because of that, there is this continuous feedback loop. Okay, models are showing drift. There is anomaly. There is bias in the model predictions. Or there is a new data set which has come up, right? So you need to go back, retrain, revalidate, redeploy. All these things need to be done on a continuous basis. And that's where, the trend towards MLOps, right? What is the solution to handle this? So as I mentioned, right, as part of our core DNA, right, open source is something we heavily standardize on. Kubeflow, which is built on top of Kubernetes, has emerged a leading solution into the MLOps space. And specifically so there, Kubeflow pipelines, right, which allows you to automate a large part of these model lifecycle, which I was talking about, right? Distributed training, hyperparameter optimization, model validation, deployment, monitoring. So that's what, we have been standardizing on. And the announcement, leading to KubeCon is that we have chosen Kubeflow pipelines as our core technology to handle MLOps needs and build our AI pipelines on top. The second thing is, now that we have standardized and rewritten the Kubeflow pipelines to run on top of Tekton. So Tekton is another, Kubernetes native project. It's part of CNCF, Cloud Native Computing Foundation, and our OpenShift pipelines as well as IBM Cloud pipelines had already standardized on Tekton, right? So we already had some investment. So when we started looking at, bringing data and machine learning pipelines on top of it, it made sense to rewrite Kubeflow pipelines to use Tekton as the underlying, core CI/CD engine instead of Argo, which is the default in Kubeflow pipelines. So we ventured down the path of, doing that work over the course of last, I would say, 9 months. Got a lot of support from Google, right, which initially is, the originator of the Kubeflow pipelines project, through Red Hat team, as well as, through the CD Foundation MLOps site. But finally, here we are. We have now Kubeflow pipelines with Tekton announced today, as well as, this particular solution is now optimized to run on top of OpenShift, where essentially, you can either bring your own Tekton engine or you can bring OpenShift pipelines, which is embedded with OpenShift. Last but not the least, right, we are launching Watson AI platform pipelines, right, which is built on top of this. And what it brings, along with the core open source capabilities, right, which we have put out, which is Kubeflow pipelines with Tekton, it brings, a lot of drag and drop interface, so you can drag and drop different components to run your distributed training or hyperparameter optimization or auto AI experiments. Plus, it also gives you very strong governance and lineage capabilities. And this is very much important in the machine learning space because once your models are running in production and the predictions are, deciding someone gets admission to a college, someone gets denied a loan, plus far more reaching consequences than that, right? You want to have very strong auditing and governance capabilities so as to be able to go back and trace if this model gave this prediction, hey, historically, has it been accurate? Is there a drift? Was it biased towards a particular gender, towards a particular race, etc.? And then you want to be able to trace back all the way which data set was used, what hyperparameters were used. So having strong auditing and governance capabilities is a must. So that's something we have focused a lot as part of the integration in the Watson AI platform pipelines. So yeah, that's essentially what we are announcing today, right? So available on OpenShift in open source, but also you can now leverage this with much more enhanced capabilities as part of the Watson portfolio.
So to me, Animesh, is the foundational nature here of how IBM built this, right? How we got to sort of Watson working in it. It really is. It speaks to the maturing of the market. It speaks to the recognition of what the issues are and how to deal with them, right? So, and it starts, I think, foundationally at ML ops, AI ops. Some people call it AI ops, and we can do another interview one day about what's the difference between ML ops and AI ops and all of that. But fundamentally, we're talking about recognizing patterns, learning from data and patterns to enhance our ability, right, to manage applications, to manage this infrastructure, right? And we've seen that mature over the last 2-3 years. IBM's been part of that, right? Then on top of that, we build the pipelines, right? And IBM made a choice that, look, Kubernetes has been a choice. It's been a huge success in the market. I don't think anyone's going to argue. And Kubernetes pipelines, built on top, again, kind of picking best in market, open source, open technologies, building on that. Then building in sort of, let's call it special sauce with Red Hat IBM Red Hat OpenShift and the IBM Cloud. Like now layering it in on top of these two foundational things we spoke about and building functionality in there. But again, leveraging the open source tools, the open source code, the open source community. And now, right now, you've got something, right? You got this stack. And now putting on top of that Watson capability, right? Which only, frankly, IBM kind of bring to this, right? And so when you look at it that way, Animesh, right? When you look at it, it's almost 5 layers thick here. When you look at it, you really see how you you start with recognizing issues, challenges in market, how people are responding, and then layering in this functionality, this technology, this know-how, these tools, and now you got something. You have something that's pretty special, and that's what the technology business is all about, right? Someone once told me very few things are truly revolutionary in our technology world, mostly evolutionary, right? And this is truly an evolutionary kind of solution that's built up on solid layer after layer after layer. So congrats to you guys on that. I think it's a great thing.
Thank you. Yeah.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead. What were you going to say?
Yeah, I mean, just few points which you mentioned, right? I think it's probably given that MLOps is the foundation, the MLOps and AIOps differentiation, right? I do want to clarify, as you mentioned rightly, right? In the beginning, like 2 years ago, yes, there was a lot of confusion, but at this point, the industry has mostly settled in terms of defining the terms, right? The way we see is MLOps is more aligned with DevOps, right? So essentially, if you see what happened in the traditional application world was there was a very solid wall between application developers and application deployers, right? But over a period of time, right, that wall fell down, right? If you're an application developer, you're also expected to go 5 steps beyond, right? Deploy your models in at least a staging environment. Deploy your applications and staging environment, configure the services, see how it looks. Right, and then that's essentially what MLOps is doing to the machine learning world, where it's no longer, hey, data scientist is saying, here is my initial model, take it and validate and deploy in production, right? So the expectation now is, given that more and more models are rolling in production, that thou shall be able to package your models in a way so that it can be validated, it can be deployed in a production-like, if not production environment. Simulate load and monitor your models for any drift, anomaly, bias, whether it's vulnerable to adversarial attacks, right? So the demand on data scientists is more, and similarly, right? So that boundary has collapsed, and that's where the evolution of MLOps and the emergence of MLOps, that Qflow pipelines becomes a tool to enable these folks to go 5 steps further, right? Whereas they were stopping 5 steps before. AIOps, on the other hand, is more like looking at the IT infrastructure, data center deployment and logs, and based on that, predicting whether your infrastructure is going to scale nicely or be able to handle the load, or thou shall remove these things which are single points of failure. Thou shall add more machines. So AIOps has gone into that area where it's, if you are holding a data center or an infrastructure, hardware infrastructure environment, right? It's actually applying AI in this environment and figuring out, right, if your infrastructure platform is going to hold the current load as well as the incoming load, or are there single points of failures like routers, network switches, etc. So I think that hopefully delineates that differentiation.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say that's excellent. Go ahead.
And the second point which you mentioned, right? Yes, I mean, so as you mentioned rightly, right? Most of the technology world at this point is evolutionary, right? It's based on where you see the trends, as I talked about the trend towards MLOps, because multiple models need to be deployed. Not only need to be deployed, they need to be monitored heavily, they need to be audited heavily, and the data scientists need to have tools which can empower them to go 5 steps beyond. Plus, the ops people who are putting these models in production, they need to have the same technology base so that they can, talk to the data scientist in the same language if they find problems, right? There was a strong need, and this is an evolution of addressing those needs, and true to the DNA of IBM and more importantly Red Hat, right? Open source is where we first look for standardizing and leveraging. But one thing which we have been doing, Alan, is, right, IBM is the second largest contributor to Qflow. So it's not only leveraging, right? We keep on giving back to the community, right? So the whole work which we did in terms of rewriting Qflow pipelines to run on top of TechTron, that has been contributed back in open source as a core. So I think it's being a good citizen of the community. Yes, you leverage and you give back, and you create a community along with you, right? Which hopefully takes the whole industry forward. Yeah.
Agreed. And that is, I mean, look, IBM for a long time has been and sometimes at the detriment of their own business, but has been a good community, open source community, contributor, member. They play well with others. They contribute a lot of code back, even going back to Linux, right? And how much code IBM contributed to Linux and everything. So no doubt about it. We've seen it with other, look in the Cube space with the service mesh stuff and others.
Yeah.
Yep. But anyway, this is exciting. And look, people still get a little giddy when they see Watson getting involved in stuff, right? And that whole AI kind of, next gen and everything that Watson conjures. So it's great. It's a great announcement. Congratulations to you and everyone at IBM. And let's see how, this comes out in market now. And I'm sure we'll get some great uses and some great examples and case studies around it.
Yeah, thanks. I think, we one of the things which we did do differently a bit this time, Alan, is right. And again, sort of changing the core DNA for how IBM works is, eat your own dog food. So essentially, over the course of last year, right, this is something which we have been running as a pilot internally to IBM now. Even within IBM, the company is transforming rapidly. So yes, there is Watson, which is building you the core AI platform, right? But there are multiple teams like Chief Data Office, CIO, IBM Research, a lot of these teams which are actually using and infusing AI, right? So we have had this technology, internally for the last 1 year, and needless to say, from our supply chain products to the CIO teams to the Chief Data Office, multiple consumers have found this really, really useful in terms of speeding up, the deployment of their models in production, but also, in terms of being able to trace back the lineage and governance when there is a problem, or when someone raises a question, why is your model doing this versus this, right? Or your model is biased, right? So we have been running this internally for the last 1 year, heavy usage from across different IBM organizations, got us very solid feedback, and, this made sense now to take it out, right? So it's a bit of change how we have done, product launches in the past, where, a small product comes first externally, and then, we use internally, but this one has followed that reverse model. So I'm hoping, based on what we have seen internally, the success resonates outside. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, we're about out of time. Animesh, thanks for joining and sharing with us this new announcement from IBM. Continued success. Keep doing what you guys are doing. It's exciting, and I think we'll all benefit from it. Be well and be safe.
Thanks a lot, Alan. Thanks for having me here. I love Florida. Hopefully, want to visit.
Maybe soon. One day you'll come down. We'll do it in person then. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks.
All righty.
Thank
you. Animesh Singh from IBM with some news coming out of KubeCon and around ML Ops and Watson and TechTon. This is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. We're going to be right back with another guest.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, securityboulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
All right. Up next, we have Gary Berman, Cyber Heroes video series. This week, Cyber Heroes is with PwC. And Gary has an amazing lineup of people on his panel. He does a great job every week, though. Here's Cyber Hero Adventures with Gary Berman.
Hello, and welcome to the Cyber Hero Adventures Defenders of the Digital Universe show. Today's show focuses on answering the question, how do organizations secure the office of the future? Businesses demonstrated that they can quickly shift their workforce from on-premise to remote, with 73% of executives calling it a success based on PwC's recent remote work survey. However, many admit that they have much more to do to prove that the remote work arrangements are secure. And there isn't much time, with 62% expecting risks from use of non-enterprise devices and software in the next 6 months due to remote work, according to PwC's Digital Trust Insights Pulse survey. CISOs also face a unique opportunity to both secure and enable their businesses, but must make strategic investments with budgets likely to remain flat for the foreseeable future. Should the transition to the remote office of the future come with the price of a cyber attack? Stay tuned to find out. Our mission is to shine the light on the people and organizations who keep us safe online, while at work, home, and school, and to serve as a business-to-business networking platform for the cybersecurity and IT communities. We've learned that 55% of human communications is nonverbal. That's why we include a video feed, so that you have the option of seeing our guests or simply to just listen. You never know who you're going to connect with and how you'll be able to maximize opportunities resulting from hearing from our great guests. As the victim of a series of cyber attacks, I've learned that the only time that you hear about hacking or cybersecurity is when the criminals win. Well, not anymore. I'm your host, Gary Berman. Let's begin by saying thank you to today's panel of unsung cyber heroes who represent the countless people who toil in anonymity to keep us safe at home, work, and school. Sean Joyce is PwC's global and U.S. cybersecurity, privacy, and forensics leader, working with clients in various sectors, providing strategic guidance, leading transformational initiatives, and advising on incident breach response and how to use cybersecurity and resiliency as business enablers. Sean previously served as the deputy director with the FBI and had daily oversight of the 36,000 men and women of the FBI and its $8 billion annual budget. Hey, Sean.
Thanks for having me.
Dr. Dennis Kagler is a leading practitioner in strategic cost transformation for strategy and PwC's strategy consulting business based in Chicago. He has deep expertise in organization design, corporate function efficiency and effectiveness, shared services, and outsourcing offshoring. He primarily focuses on consumer packaged goods and retail industries, and also has extensive experience in automotive, healthcare, and financial service industries. Hi, Dennis. Great to see you.
Hi, Gary. Glad to be here.
Emily Staff is PwC's Cybersecurity, Privacy, and Forensics Integrated Solutions Leader, specializing in incident and threat management, crisis management, cybersecurity strategy, and product and service strategy and leadership. Ms. Staff serves as a strategic advisor to commercial clients for complex cybersecurity investigations, cybersecurity strategy, trust, resilience, and business enablement solutions, and regulatory and litigation matters involving sensitive information. Hi, Emily. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Gary.
Sean, we're going to learn a lot about what all of you do on today's show. However, I'd like to begin by asking, why do you do it? What's your mission? Tell us your origin story.
Well, Gary, I think all of us really do it for what I would consider the right reasons, is really to protect these companies and probably a broader PwC mission. It's a mission with purpose, which is really, doing something for society as a whole and bringing that benefit. And, I think what our practice really does is help companies each and every day, deal with some people out there, as are trying to do harm.
One of the things that I've noticed about everyone in the cybersecurity community is this tremendous humility, the sense of service, the sense of belonging, the sense of giving back. Is that a valid assessment, from your experience?
So this is what I will say. I think it is really, I am so fortunate as the leader of the practice to have, hundreds and hundreds, well, thousands of people like doing this job each and every day. And the credit is to those people, right? And I am humbled by the great work that they do each and every day. So like you said, I can't take, I really can't take credit for the great work that those people do. And they come to work every day. There was one company that called us this morning that was under a ransomware attack, and really, getting a group of people there, helping them out, and really getting them back online and be able to help them function as a company. I think people get a lot of, good feeling out of that.
And I'll add to that, Gary, it takes a village, and PwC is about a lot more than just our individual cybersecurity, privacy, and forensics team. When we're going to the market and talking with clients, we're understanding the breadth of their issues. From cybersecurity events to strategy in the boardroom. And success is really bringing together an entire team that can share in that problem solving.
Indeed. So Emily, tell us your origin story.
I've got an interesting 20 plus year, I've learned to drop the number after the 20, experience advising clients in various IT matters, but mostly revolving around cybersecurity breach response. So I've been all over the world and have helped hundreds of clients in all different industries and sectors respond to unplanned events. So that can involve insiders behaving badly, as Gary, you've experienced in your own personal and professional background. It can involve threat actors penetrating your network. There are many different shapes and sizes that these threats come in, and keeping us on our toes every day is staying abreast of them and trying to stay in front of them to protect our corporate networks and the sensitive information that we hold most dear as corporate citizens.
You mentioned, corporate citizens. I had a very interesting conversation with some folks about the MITRE attack framework. And to me, what was really incredible is just how massive it is, how many different attack vectors there are, and the complexity of it. Can you share with us an unplanned event and a real life example of what you're referring to?
We have great pride in helping our clients stay under the radar when threats emerge. And I often say that success in this business is keeping our clients out of the newspaper. So the vast majority of the things that we see every day are things that you never read about or hear about. The proverbial iceberg diagram. That being said, in this interesting and very unique time that we are in, there is a commonality, and Sean's actually already mentioned it once today. There are two major attack patterns that we're seeing over and over, and these are not new things. They're just very opportunistically preyed upon right now because of COVID and because of the remote work environment. But that's ransomware and kind of spear phishing or regular old phishing attacks, because people are at a distance and expected to be working virtually today, and threat actors know that, so they're getting better and better at laying booby traps, if you will, in email to get people to click on attachments and other sorts of links. That, as you know, if you spent some time studying the attack framework, is a principal initial vector to get in and then establish the remaining network movement activities that a threat actor wants to do to maintain his persistence.
So Gary, I just want to add to that. I think there's a couple of things we're seeing. We're definitely seeing an increased activity by nation states. So we're seeing that especially in the healthcare field, the bio, life sciences, as you can see, the race for the vaccine, and we're seeing nation states very active in that area. In addition, as Emily cited, from the criminal perspective, right, we've just seen, the quote was given to me, I've never seen so much phishing in so many languages. So it is just a incredible increase in the number of social engineering attacks, right, that are happening via phishing. And then let's not forget the business email compromise. As we've moved to the remote workforce, I think that has become more prevalent, and we've seen a sharp uptick. And then ransomware is really off the charts. So, you know, I know you're familiar with Maze and then Crackbot, but there's been several others. And, you know, globally, when I talk to my leaders throughout the world, they're seeing the same increase. So this isn't something that's really unique to the United States. It's really global, and something that I think, you know, everyone's seeing that sharp increase.
Coincidentally, or perhaps not coincidentally, one of the characters in our comic is called Phoebe the Fisher. And we were very deliberate about creating that character. She has a harpoon, of course, which is for, you know, whale fishing. She has a spear for targeted spear fishing, and she also has a, you know, fishing rod for kind of regular, you know, spray and pray kind of fishing. Dennis, let's hear about your origin story, your mission, and why do you do what you do every day?
Well, I'm a newcomer to this group. As you mentioned in my introduction, I primarily work with clients on their organizational issues, their organization strategy, organization design, workforce strategy. And frankly, since the pandemic hit, going back to early March, just about every one of our clients has been consumed with what's going to happen to their people. How do they think about their organization? How do they continue to operate around the company? What are the implications for their people? So I've refocused my efforts on what's going to happen to the companies during the pandemic and post-pandemic. I've been spending a lot of our time focusing on what we've coined the office of the future, thinking about who's going to come back to the office when, how long we're going to be in the office, what is the office for at all if we come back to it. And if we're going to continue working from home in a substantial clip into the future, even the post-pandemic, what does that mean in terms of how we work together, how we interact, how we engage with each other? But a part of the reason I'm here today is what happens to the security of all the data and the information the company possesses. A lot of what Emily and Sean talk about in terms of the attacks, as well as just basic good old negligence or fraud of the employees who hold that data. It used to be in the company's offices. Now it's in people's living rooms, kitchens, bedrooms, wherever they're working. How do you make sure the data, the information the company has is going to be secure and trusted going into the future, the work from home model? So
you've asked a really good question, Dennis. I'd like you to answer it, please.
Sure. So Gary, I think many of our clients have been working from home at a substantial clip since the pandemic. I spend a lot of my time in financial services, but also work with clients in other industries too. Just about everybody, anybody who has office workers, they've been working maybe 90+%, somewhere around 95% of their employees have been working from home the past 6-7 months. And the consensus is that's going to continue into the new year and probably closer to the summer. Very much depends on the vaccine schedules or the therapeutics. But a lot of our clients are finding out that working from home has worked for them pretty well. And there's a lot of risks of coming back to the office, exposing the company's employees and ultimately the company's business to more risk, perhaps undue risk. So they're going to continue working from home. So it's going to be a good year if you think about coming back to the office sometime in April, since we vacated offices and started working from home. Employees are getting used to it. They enjoy spending time at home, being flexible with their times, avoiding lengthy, painful commutes. So there's a lot of goodness on the employee side, and we're expecting that some sort of work from home is going to be here to stay. So that doesn't mean company offices are dead. It's a hybrid workplace model where people rotate in and out of the office. So perhaps 2 days a week in the office and 3 days a week at home. So we did our survey, I think you mentioned it too, earlier this summer. 72% of the employees said they'd like to work from home at least 2 days a week. But only 30% said they only want to work from home. So still a vast majority of employees want to come back to the office, only part-time, not like what we used to do. So our hypothesis, educated guess, if you will, is that somewhere around 2 to 3 days a week working at home, 2 to 3 days a week working in the office is going to be fairly common. So if you believe that assumption, that means 50% of the employees are going to be working from home at any given. So 50% of the employees are going to be connecting to the company network or possessing the company data in their homes at any given time. So that's going to introduce a lot of risk, has already introduced a lot of risk, 95% of them working at home right now. And we've managed it, improvised it in many ways, but going forward, we're going to need to be much more thoughtful about what we do and how we do it.
And Emily, going back to your incident response career, what are the most common attack vectors that we're seeing right now?
I think we talked a little bit about the many flavors of spear phishing, phishing attacks from small to very, very targeted, which are what are referred to as those whaling attacks. But as people are working from home, there is an inherent expectation that business shall go on and operations shall, won't slow down. And so I think people are a little bit more willing to accept unknown things that may be coming to them in email or through different portals that they may typically access for their job. And so, falling victim to clicking on a link, downloading an attachment, going to a website and trusting that it's something that you're supposed to be doing for your job and offering up your credentials, I think are happening more and more, not because people are being lazy. In fact, it's quite the opposite. I think there is a doubling down of effort, and people that are working from home saying, I'm going to be as effective as I ever was before, and therefore I'm going to really jump into all of the different responsibilities I have. So if I'm being asked to go to a new website, it must be part of my job. If I'm being asked to log into this new system, gosh, that must be something that IT has rolled out to make our working remotely easier. So I think people really have to be cognizant of that user experience and aware of what they are clicking on. And if I may offer a suggestion, I think one thing that companies, in my experience the last 6 months, maybe haven't asked as many questions about to us as consultants is around training. What kind of training and awareness should we be rolling out to people? I think people have rushed to put technology fixes in place, and once it's fixed, dust my hands, we're good to go. But you can't underestimate the value and the importance of that user behavior and offering people training and assistance to do their job remotely using these new technologies.
That's a really interesting insight. I think there maybe even be this kind of almost misallocation of resources in that. In the cybersecurity community, I've heard that enterprises have about 47 different solutions in their security stack. Some have many, many more. About 80% of money is spent on solutions, and yet I've also learned that 80 or more % of attacks are caused by simple human error.
I think it is, Gary, and I think that's one of the issues. To add to what Emily said, as the workforce has gone remote, you're looking at virtual private networks. You're looking at collaboration tools. You're looking at the tools today that we're on together that companies are using, and as you know, they have vulnerabilities. And it's almost a race between the adversaries and the companies to have that ability to patch. And then you have the typical things that are related to the pandemic that unfortunately a lot are really taking avail of. So I think there is a lot of that. And as you mentioned, in this industry, there are many, many point solutions and not really what I would consider an orchestrated approach from a technology perspective.
So given your experience in the FBI and having such good insight into conditions on the ground, how have CISOs in aggregate responded to this rapid change in everything?
So first, I think they have done a phenomenal job. They have really, I think, reacted quickly, and they've been proactive in many instances. But I think the first thing is that they're really looking at two major things. A, how do I secure the workforce? And then secondly, how do I enable the business? So that secure and enablement, I think, are key functions. And I really think you've seen a point in time where the CISO has moved from a back office, hey, who are those people over there, to a front office where they're involved in the strategy. When some of these brick and mortar companies had to revamp their digital presence, they were at the table. How do we protect ourselves? How do we do this securely? How do we enable the business? I think really the CISO has truly moved into the C-suite and has been a key player.
And do you think now that they command the respect and the influence and the budgets that cybersecurity warrants?
I think they've commanded the respect. I think what now though is, I think they're part of the overall business. They're a fabric of the business strategy, right? Enabling those business drivers. How do I make it so we can do this digital transformation, stay in business, and make that experience for the customer seamless, yet secure, protecting our brand, right? Building that trust, right? They're enabling that, right? They're really those trust builders. And I think they've done a great job. You know, one of the statistics we had is that 50% of CISOs have seen an increased interaction with the board, and even more, right, with the business, right, unit leaders. And I think that's obviously indicative of what we're talking about today.
And just to amplify what you're talking about, would it be okay with you if we share some of the survey results in our show notes?
Oh, that would be great. I think it is. I think it's insightful, and will provide them with some, really things that are happening currently.
And Emily, I want to come back to something you said about awareness and training. What should an organization be, thinking and doing with the new conditions on the ground? And in the spirit of full disclosure, we've recently signed a joint venture with a great cybersecurity company based out of Israel, and they're going to be animating the characters in our comics and bringing them to virtual reality, but also enabled to be able to be used on computers and phones and things like that. But what should an organization be doing now?
Gary, I think you have to make it personal for people. And there is no better chance than right now, because we are in each other's living rooms, to bring work into the home, and in a way that can be helpful, not just pervasive. So what do I mean by that? If training yesterday, and by yesterday I mean 7 months ago, focused on what does securing data in your office feel like, that would be a very different training curriculum than what does securing data and all of the access that you have to do your job feel like today. And so not only do you need to speak to people about basic operational hygiene, so we've talked about phishing and clicking on things many times already, but also how do you help people secure their own home networks? So working from home is one thing when it actually works and the lights are on and I can do my job because I have internet. The job is not done there though. The job must go on to securing that access. So including with people's training, real tips about how to make their home network secure. Things like make sure you've reset the default passwords on every connected device in your home. Have you thought about enabling firewalls and subnets in your personal network so that your work laptop is using the same Wi-Fi that your kid's school is using, but they're completely separated technically? There are some very basic things that we can train home users to do to ensure there's additional security in place. And the last thing I'll say is training people to interact with each other and go through simulated cyber events. So what that means is tabletop exercises. So from the comfort of my chair in my office, I could connect with anybody in my executive team around the world to walk through a simulated cybersecurity breach response event right now in the COVID world. That is an area where we've seen an incredible uptick in interest from our clients because it's so easy to convene. You don't have to worry about schedules anymore because it's so easy to convene dozens of people from any time zone all over the world to walk through a cybersecurity simulation experience. That's a form of training. It really is.
And Dennis, if budget was not an issue and you can do whatever you want, for the office of the future and to keep it secure, what are we looking at?
Yeah, I'm gonna ask help from Emily and Sean on this one, but maybe to get this started, I'm gonna pick it up just a little bit from the people perspective, organizationally, in terms of, as I look at this from a productivity effectiveness view. Employees are asking for basic tools and basic support to make their experiences at home as effective as possible. And the most common aspects that we're seeing from employees is around, help me make my home office as productive as possible. And that's as simple as a more comfortable chair. But believe it or not, for many, it is about access to reliable, high-speed internet, and companies making sure they can help their employees get that access across their operations in the US or globally. The second piece goes to collaboration tools, collaboration suites that companies can apply and deploy in their organizations. We're finding out when we're remote, the efficacy of the collaboration tools makes our lives that much more, that much simpler, easier, and connects us with our colleagues so much better. The employees are asking for better collaboration tools and technology. And this is where I'm going to turn to Emily and Sean and ask their help input on how to make that as effective and secure for employees as possible, and others. Yeah.
One of the things that comes to mind right away, Dennis, is investments in identity and access management technologies. So understanding who it is that's on the other side of that network GET request that's trying to log into a system, and to authenticate that that is the home office user that you are expecting to log into that system. So Gary, your question was, budgetary concerns aside, what is the wish list? Identity and access management investments would undoubtedly be in the top three. What that also allows you to do is make the user experience more seamless. So rather than as a home office worker logging in with 6 different accounts to 6 different web portals that I might need to do my job, making that all seamlessly integrated through single sign-on or other sorts of identity management technologies would definitely make that experience easier. And then the other angle is cloud technology in general, moving all those on-premise assets, in other words, systems that have to be logged into with a direct connection to a data center in your physical environment, moving that all to the cloud so that you can log into it from anywhere at any time, as long as you're an authenticated user.
And Sean, was there any data in your survey that talked about budget allocations and that shows that things were leveling off in terms of expenditures? How does that look?
So I think there is some indication that the budgets are slightly less, but not as much as experienced in some other parts of the company. But Gary, I think it's important when you look at I want to look at it a little bit from a macro perspective. There's 2 big things going on here. There's acceleration of digital transformation. Everyone is trying to make sure they have that omni-channel digital presence. The second thing is acceleration to the cloud. When I come down to how that affects us, right, being that, purpose-led, values-driven organization, it comes down to data trust is what we call it. We have 3 strategic priorities. Data trust. How do you make sure the right people have the right access to the data, right? The second one is resiliency, right? How are we making sure not just a pandemic, but for the next natural disaster, the next cyber attack, how are we making sure we are an agile, right? In a company that can quickly adapt. And Emily mentioned one of it is that cloud transformation. And the last one is that secure enablement. How am I leveraging technology? But it goes back to what you do as a business. That low tech training and awareness is invaluable. It's about policy. It's about process, right? Then coupled and integrated with technology. All of these collaboration tools Dennis is talking about, are we making sure they're approved? Are we making sure that we have done our homework on, right, that they're entered into, they're configured correctly, that when the patches come out, right, we're able to do that. Are we making sure on, home devices? Because not everyone has the luxury of having a company device. Have we actually pushed out to them, right, the antivirus software they need and other things? So I think it's a combination of things, and it really is like, it's an exciting time.
As we're wrapping up here, which kind of makes me sad because I can listen and learn from you, all day and night, and I'm sure our audience feels the same way. Sean, is there anything else that you'd like to share that would amplify your mission?
I think the most important thing is this is really about a partnership with our, all the CISOs out there, all the chief technology officers, chief compliance officers, chief privacy officers, and really in a very difficult time, how are we actually securing, right, that brand of our company, right, and making sure we're heading in the right direction as we kind of turn the corner on this pandemic. I think that's the critical thing as we go forward, and it's about enabling the business and securing the business.
Emma, and thank you for that. And Dennis, is there anything you'd like to add?
What I'd like to point out is a version of work from home is here to stay. There are some skeptical executives out there. There are some skeptical companies that do believe they're much more productive, effective when they're in the office. But frankly, what I'm seeing in my client engagements is those are getting fewer and fewer. And just about every client that I'm speaking to these days, they are planning for a future where partial, flexible work from home is going to be with them for the longer haul. So that means we need to plan for a future where a significant portion of our employees are working from homes on a daily basis. And that does introduce a whole new set of challenges, especially around data security and cyber risks. And this is the time to start planning for that. It's coming.
Emily, you're going to have the final word. What else would you like to add for our audience?
I just want to say, Gary, that in times like this, where we are leaning on technology to get us through what it might mean to work from home and enable the workforce from anywhere, we can't lose sight of a very simple statement, and that is people are your greatest asset, period. So when, as Sean and others have referenced, as we've watched cybersecurity kind of come into the light and come into its maturity over the years, cybersecurity professionals were an IT function. Today, they're in the boardroom, as you aptly pointed out. The most effective cybersecurity professionals are those who enlist the help of cross-functional business colleagues and recognize that to get through this, we are going to have to pick up the four corners of the problem together. And that's not one person shouldering the load of all of this. That's how do I recruit all the people around me so that collectively we can get this all done. You asked before whether CISOs are firmly rooted in the boardroom today. I just point back to all of the strategies and all of the roadmaps that have been asked for funding over the years. Those security leaders who maybe were seen as transformational 5-6 years ago, today are seen as clairvoyant, because the things that they were asking for money and funding for 6 years ago are now what is accelerating us through this crisis.
Well, thank you so much for Sean, Dennis, and Emily for this incredible show. If you would like to be a guest on our show, please send an email to Gary@cyberheroescomics.com. Thanks, everyone.
Great show this week, Gary. I really enjoyed that. Next up, we have another good show for you. It's our DevOps Unbound series. Before I tell you about it, I should tell you last week we did our monthly DevOps Unbound roundtable, and it was on testing. We had an amazing panel, amazing guest, amazing audience, and I think you really, after watching today's show, it is available on demand. Go check out that DevOps Unbound panel on testing. But today, DevOps Unbound episode, so it's not a live audience, not live questions, is around accessibility and usability and building that into your DevOps pipeline and what you're designing. Our guests are Sean Kelly of Tricentis, Paul Pickney of Swisslog Healthcare, and Paula Goyens from Launch Darkly. It's a great show, really important stuff here. Check it out. I hope you enjoy it. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another edition of DevOps Unbound. Of course, after our opening kind of credit, I'm always looking to go vroom, vroom. But we are ready to vroom, vroom today. We're ready to speed right into what I think is going to be a great discussion. And it's a discussion we could have at any time, but through the lens of DevOps, Agile, Lean, and what goes on in today's development cycles and world, I think it's even more important. We're going to be discussing today usability and accessibility and how DevOps and similar or aligned technologies are changing it, influencing it, how it's being done from a professional point of view. Speaking of professional, I'm really happy to introduce you to our panel this week. We have an amazing panel. First of all, actually a man I used to work with probably more years ago than he wants to admit. Paul Pickney is with us. Paul, welcome to DevOps Unbound.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Why don't you share a little background with our audience?
I'm a lead designer, user experience designer at a company called Swisslog Healthcare. I have done user experience since before user experience was even a term, including a lot of accessibility stuff, including at Dish Network. I got their Dish Hopper accessible. I worked on accessibility for a network security company and a few other telecoms before that. And currently trying to get us up to speed at my company now.
Excellent. Joining Paul and I is Paula from Launch Darkly. And again, Paula, I don't want to mangle your last name, but it's Goyanis?
Goyanis, that's right.
Goyanis, okay. Introduce yourself to the audience.
Hi, I'm Paula Goyanis. I'm a software engineer at Launch Darkly. I've been working at Launch Darkly for a couple of years, but even before I was a software engineer, I've been interested in web accessibility and just like the inclusion of all people in the web. And I've been advocating really hard at Launch Darkly for accessibility for a long time now.
Fantastic.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Third member of our panel today is Sean Kelly. Sean, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure.
My name is Sean Kelly. I'm the VP of User Experience at Tricentis. I've been there a whole whopping 3 months. So we're just getting we're formalizing our accessibility plans for software plans. And before that, I actually started off in aerospace. So doing accessibility and usability for bombers and fighter jets for about 5 years, then transitioned to healthcare for another, I think, 11 years. So it's really interesting to see how the common themes across different industries actually, how they play out in different circumstances.
Sure is. That is interesting. And then last but not least is my co-host here on DevOps Unbound. He's the co-founder or the founder and CEO of Accelerated Strategies Group. He was my co-founder at previous companies, Mitch Ashley. Hey, Mitchell, welcome.
Hey, it's good to be with you. I just want to say, unlike our other panelists, I am not a user experience designer, though I've worked with 3 fabulous designers and teams starting in the 90s with Josh Stoller and Monica Merricks, and then with Paul Pinkney. So learned a ton from folks like Paul and others and our whole panel.
But you are a user.
I'm a user and I do have an experience.
Yes. Okay. There you go then. That qualifies you for this. So guys, first of all, thank you all for joining us. Let's jump into it. So I think, the idea of user accessibility, and I'm blanking right now on the very first sort of, was it 508? What was the number for when we first started saying that websites needed to be accessible for people with limited vision and other sort of handicaps? It wasn't a 508. That's a nonprofit company. But
Go
go.
ahead.
I think what you may be thinking of is Section 508.
Yes.
For government websites is the thing that says that in the United States, websites have to be accessible.
So that goes back probably 20 years, I'm going to bet, or 15, 18 years. And I think for many of us, that was the stake in the ground, if you will, for accessibility. But of course, I think our expectations around accessibility and our consumers' expectations around accessibility have changed drastically since Section 508 all those years ago. You guys are experts. I'm going to let you. Who wants to give us a brief history of accessibility time?
I guess I could start off with that. Actually, it's interesting in the military world. It actually goes back a little bit further than 20 years ago, starting with Military Standard 1472, which basically outlined how cockpit design should be, including a little bit of display. So more hardware based, and then that led to Section 508 and W3C standards. It's interesting though. I've seen like over the past 20 years, as kind of accessibility going from a checklist, right? Like check the boxes, make sure you do that, more towards a business imperative. We should do this to be better than the competition. And now it's kind of table stakes. So the users actually kind of expect usability as like a baseline, right? It's not enough just to have it anymore. It's become an expectation across a lot of different industries. So that's actually really good to hear, right? Because if users expect that, that means we are forced to make our products more accessible. And it's really interesting to see the evolution of that over time.
I'll just add a little bit. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, please join in.
Sure, I'll just add on to that. One of the things I noticed, especially when Section 508 first came out, is it was very technical. There were a lot of requirements about how you tag things like tables and things like that. And it was just very, very much on the development side. And a lot of those some of those have actually relaxed a little bit in favor of things to design on the front end more. So it's gone from much less on the technical side, even though there are additional technical requirements now, but some of those have actually kind of gone away because they found out they weren't really all that useful and they were really difficult to do in favor of more on the design side. The other thing is, I don't know if people are aware of CVAA, which is the Consumer Video Accessibility Act. And they were falling kind of behind the web world. So things like set-top boxes from Dish and other companies like that, DirecTV, they had to kind of get caught up. And it wasn't until about 5 or 6 years ago, I think, when we really, all of a sudden out of nowhere, it felt like out of nowhere, we were kind of behind the 8 ball. We had to get all the set-top boxes up to date. Because one of the things I noticed when I first started at Dish is they were relying on these colored buttons on the remote control. Well, 3 of them are red, yellow, and green. So already you're way behind the 8 ball with that all by itself. So we had to redesign our remote control. Then we had to add text to audio or text to speech and audio description and even things like Bluetooth audio so people could put in hearing aids and obviously closed captioning and things like that. So just wanted to throw that in as well.
Absolutely. Paula, you want to comment?
Yeah, I wanted to mention, since we're kind of talking about the law, in terms of the law, the other thing in the United States that really upholds web accessibility is the Americans with Disabilities Act. The ADA has been the thing cited in a bunch of these lawsuits. And Section 508 was amended, I think in like the late 90s, like 1998, I want to say something like that. But really, we've been leaning a lot on the ADA since it's like accommodation of public spaces. for like non-government websites, for example, to be able to actually file those lawsuits. Like erudite and philosopher Beyonce was actually sued not too long ago for having an inaccessible website. So, you know, it's,
Really?
anybody is open to it. There, you know, the Domino's lawsuit was a big deal, maybe a year or two ago. So yeah, and that's just the United States. Web accessibility, I think Canada has like very robust laws around web accessibility. So it's not just here in the US.
What about EU? Is there any specific EU kind of regulations to worry about here?
I'm sure there are, although I can't I remember acronyms off the top of my head here. But yeah, I'm sure. Listen, if it's in the US and it's in Canada, it's in the EU.
Interesting.
You know, one of the things I was going to jump in with, Alan, is that when I was experienced this, kind of exposed to user experience and accessibility, there's a lot of focus around visual impairments, of course, and ways to design applications. And of course, we have, you know, hearing and ability to input and you know, speech to text and text to speech and all those kinds of things. So it's all of those things individually, but it's also collectively, because oftentimes you may have someone who have more than one disability. So it's a challenging field, but it's also, I think, a very rewarding field from the people that I talk with, because you are literally helping people, you know, in how they interface with the world, at least through computers, softwares, hardware, et cetera.
That actually is a really good story from my healthcare days too. So you mentioned multiple disabilities and so forth and designing for that. So I worked on the Kaiser Permanente website. That was my main focus. This is back in like late to mid 2000s. And we had to design a care facility website for neuropsychiatric patients that were going through rehabilitation and so forth. So we really had to make it accessible for people that had traumatic brain injuries. And that was probably the hardest design challenge I've ever had to do in my life, right? There's no standard for that. You really have to talk to people that have brain injuries and figure out, okay, how do I take this really dense, complicated medical information and distill it down in a way that's going to make sense for people that don't have, you know, memory that works like most people do. So that was through a lot of user testing, and it was probably one of the most rewarding projects I've ever done as well, just because it was so, we kind of brought, you know, more people to the table of using that product that were previously shut out before. And that's such a rewarding feeling. I'm pretty sure people on the panel also have stories like that too.
You know, I mean, and that is a great thing. I think it also brings up, Sean, something that we need to hit on. You know, when I first became aware of Section 508 and designing websites, it was really about visual impairment, right? You had to assume, you know, if someone had a visual impairment, was that website usable? Even if it was a relatively minor one like color blindness, and they couldn't tell red green or what have you, right? When so many buttons were red stop, green go, and stuff like that. But when we talk about accessibility, I'd like to think, have evolved since 25 years ago. And it's more than just visual impairments, right? Sean mentioned cognitive kind of impairments. Paul, I'm, you know, at Dish, I'm sure was a lot of visual, and Paula, what other kind of impairments do we try to design around or design for with our accessibility solutions today?
Yeah, in the W3C website, there's actually a list of all kinds of impairments. So there's cognitive, neurological, mobile impairments, as well as visual impairments, hearing impairments. But I think something really important to note about accessibility is that it benefits everyone. And it's not just permanent disabilities. There are also temporary limitations, like I've got a baby in one arm, so I'm typing with one hand, or the light is really bright coming out through my window, or I am hungover. 2020 has been very hard on all of us. I'm not hungover right now, though. All of those are temporary limitations.
I'm gonna take your word for it.
and all of those kind of what benefits those situations, those temporary limitations, are what benefits people with disabilities as well. And I think something really interesting to note is that, yes, like we are building and designing for people with, you know, neurological impairments, people with visual impairments, but really, I think it's important for the framing to be not, I'm designing for this person with a visual impairment. It's I'm designing for this user flow, or like this, being able to accomplish this goal, regardless of what your disability might be.
And I think that's an important piece of it too. It's not just how do I make this website better for people who have X, Y kind of impairment. It's about what do we want people to accomplish, right?
Yeah, I'll add to that and say I totally agree. And the other thing is, one of the things you find that when you do a lot of these, you design for accessibility, it's good for everybody. It's not just anybody with particular impairments or anything like that. You're bumping up the usability for literally everybody in most cases. The other thing I'd mention, you wanted to talk about other kinds of disabilities. The interesting thing at Dish was, for example, designing for blind people. One of the things people didn't realize, blind people watch TV and they call it watching TV. And so you need to provide those facilities so they can actually interpret what's going on with the show, because it's a very social thing. They get with all their friends, including a lot of blind friends, and they talk about these things, what's going on with this show and that sort of thing. So that's something that I'm not sure many people have considered.
Now, there's also the universal impairment we all have, which is setting the clock on your VCR. I don't think that's been solved yet. Just throwing it a little bit.
You're showing your age. I don't know how many of these people have VCRs anymore.
It's a 3-letter acronym. I thought
yeah,
we'll use it.
Yeah, it's what they used to tape stuff on. But you just setting your clock on any appliance can be a challenge.
Hey, my cassette deck here. What are you talking about?
Yeah, 8-track tapes. But anyway, but no, I mean, these are all really great and valid points in that we need to do that. But, there's another aspect talking about the user. So, for instance, if you use an iPhone, and I'm sure it's probably like this on Android too, there's a whole section in the configuration settings on iPhone, accessibility, where you can have better contrast, change the fonts, make more sound notifications or less, or what have you. And I'm going to tell you, true confession time here. I was hesitant to enable some of those applications that would enhance my usability, my user experience, the same way I was hesitant to take the discount at the movie theater, when they said, oh, you qualify for a senior discount. I said, oh, and I said, I'll take the money, fine, give me the discount. But, or getting that AARP card on the day of your 50th birthday. So how much does that play into it, where some users don't want to take advantage of what we're doing around accessibility to make it easier for them? I mean, how do you design that into the equation? Sean?
Well, yeah, I think it's kind of like what Paula said. It's just if you design it, you just kind of bake it into the design solution, right? So it's not like a separate design solution. You use the use case and just make it accessible for everyone. So for example, contrast ratios, right? I think most people, I don't know, it's been a long time, but most people in their early 20s can probably look at those little tiny icons on the iPhone, for example, and make sense of it. But I mean, I can't, right? I'm 42 and I would not personally, just out of sheer, I don't know, ego preservation, would not go into the settings to change the contrast ratio for my icons, right? But I think if you just make that one solution for everybody, it just kind of works and you don't have to think about it. And I think, except in very limited cases, that's the right solution to go with.
But Apple's the maven of design, right? We all, look to Apple. But yet they have this. They've done that. So are you saying they poor design on their part?
No. I mean, so they have kind of two levels of accessibility, right? The levels of accessibility they kind of bake in that's going to hit a lot of people. Then there's like this super set where you might need a little extra. So it's funny because they have the accessibility settings, but with a regular design, it's already built in and you don't even see it or you don't think about it.
Paul, interested in in your Dish experience, so do we make accessibility an option, or as Sean says, it's just built in? There is no option.
It depended on what it was. Like for example, you don't want text to speech on by default. That's just going to really annoy people. and you know, I think we've seen this on like DVDs and Blu-rays where they automatically turn on all this stuff, and so most people don't want closed captioning on by default, so they wind up having to go back and turn it off. It's just weird. There's only a handful that seem to have done that, but I'm trying to remember the other things we have to do. But certainly the color blindness thing was a big thing, and basically when we took care of anybody with any kind of CVD or color vision deficiency, it actually was easier for people to even just look at a remote and see a symbol rather than a color, and that sort of thing. The other thing we did is for example, we decided when you pick up the remote, maybe one of the automatic things we did is the keyboard lights up right on the remote control. Guess what? That wasn't just for people with vision problems. That was, everybody really loved that one because a lot of people watch TV in the dark. So,
yeah, no, I appreciate that on my iPad.
Think about voice control. I mean, there are things that are sold as features, right? And voice control for that are built into remote controls and different electronics. That's you know, a big feature that are advertised by the cable companies and others. So, and of course, that improves accessibility too.
Yeah, guys, I got a couple of different angles here that I want us to go in on. Let's turn from accessibility on its own now, as it relates to primarily people who have challenges, to usability, which is closely aligned with it, but is maybe a little bit broader in our scope, right? And all three of you, you know, designing and interfaces and so forth, what would have been some of the big breakthroughs you think we've made around usability that have enabled this world we live in where everything's an app? And it's, you know, what amazes me is 3-year-olds can figure apps out like this. You know, people who get a little older kind of struggle. And there must be something about usability, a lesson there somewhere. But what do you think on that, Paula? Why don't you kick off?
Yeah, I think there's been an adoption of universal design, where it's kind of to the point that Sean and Paul were making previously, which is like, you know, making sure that you design with like inclusion in mind from the get-go, and then you can have like a second layer of accessibility, you know, if you have like special like needs just above what is already there. I mean, this is the equivalent of like in the real world, having like at the front of a building, like a really nice ramp kind of along a set of stairs, you know, it looks very beautiful, as opposed to having like some janky ramp at the back of the building, you know, where you can't like just access it like everybody else does if you have a different need. So I think that first example, right, in the real world is more like universal design. And I think there's been a breakthrough in making sure that our apps are kind of starting with universal design, and that's going to improve usability, right? Because accessibility benefits everybody, and anything that is accessible is probably going to improve usability. I think also just like, you know, having to use touch screens and the fact that technology kind of permeates every aspect of our lives, and maybe we're using technology while we're driving, for example, or like while we are distracted, while we are pushing a grocery cart with one hand, has really pushed us to like design and build, you know, really usable things, even in limited situations.
Fair enough. Paul?
Yeah, one thing I'll add to that is, yeah, and I agree with that, is we've gone forward in a lot of respects, and I also feel like we've gone backward. And the reason I say that is, for example, when you talk about kids being able to get on an iPad and figure it out, it's because they're willing to explore. They're very playful. They like to explore things. They find things. Whereas you have somebody who's not quite so, shall we say, technologically brave, like say my mother, the affordances aren't there. So she doesn't know how to get to certain things because you have to do a lot of discovery sometimes to use something like an iPad. So we got to be a little bit cognizant of that. I think the lack of affordance in a lot of features is something we need to make sure, you know, we work on a little bit, because some of these devices for people who are a little bit scared of technology are very difficult actually to use. But in terms of things like touch targets, for example, I think touch screens have helped us with even desktop web applications, for example, because we're looking at things like, I forget if it's Hicks or Fitts law, where basically the ability to and the speed with which you can actually click on a control has to do with its size and the distance you are from that thing. And touchscreens have taught us a lot about, let's make things big. Don't make these little bitty text pieces that we used to do that you could click on nicely with a mouse, because a mouse gives you a lot of control. Instead, let's make these nice big targets, and that helps everybody.
Yep. Sean, any thoughts on that?
Well, they did a pretty good job. I had a list of things I was going to mention, and I think about more than half of them got checked off as they were talking. So definitely, I think one thing that's also helped out too, about a couple more things, voice controls as well, because that kind of forces people to make the interactions as simple as possible. And that kind of carries over from voice design into actual physical screen design, for example. The other thing too, it's a little bit meta, but it's also the broadening of what we mean by user experience. So I think, I've seen it kind of be more expansive, right? Where before we just considered the end product experience itself, right? And I think now we're looking at experience in a broader sense, where it's, what's the person's ecosystem? What is their environment? How are they learning this? So for example, and I'm sure Paula can speak to this being a software engineer, it is harder than hell to learn a new programming language if you don't have the right basis for it, right? And no matter how easy the tool is to use, for example, like a software tool, like in the tech space, no matter how usable it is, if you don't have that foundational knowledge, it's going to be completely difficult. So I think we've seen the definition expand to include things like learning or helping people understand not just how to use the product, but educating about the discipline as well. And I'm kind of jealous of people that are coming out of school now learning programming, because there's a lot of online tutorials, there's a lot of in-product support to learn things, and a lot of community forums. That's part of the broader definition of experience. I think that's really helped improve usability of the products as well.
Sure. Right.
One of the big advances I want to add to this conversation is, again, I'll show my age. I can remember the day of wireframes just printed on paper, simulated mouse pointer manipulated by a pencil or something to simulate a design. Think about the tools that we have today that designers can use to build a complete graphical interface, sometimes even simulating full application or most of the application functionality to do usability testing, but also to experiment and make rapid changes. So the tool set, the technology to embody the design is so much better than I would say even 10 years ago. You think about it in the Xcode development environment, what the UI simulation tools were, very basic Mac app or an app for a phone. Now it's, okay, I want to see this on every model of every phone, on watches, and on my webpage. You can do that from a design tool. Again, not just about accessibility. There's a lot of other capabilities, but it's a great environment to work in. I'm kind of like Sean says, what a great place to start if you're getting in the industry now.
Yeah,
that brings a very good point, actually, too. I think more than anything, it's also, we don't have to sell user testing anymore. Well, not as much anyway. Where before, I remember I had to fight.
Careful, Sean. I know you're only there 3 months, but I will give you a hint. In Tricentis, do never say you don't have to sell testing. Just kidding.
Let me rephrase that.
Yeah.
So for user testing, right, we can put our prototypes in front of users a lot quicker because of the tooling and because of broader organizational support for testing. And yeah, you can just test a lot more people a lot faster with the new tools and so forth. And I think our testing methods have actually evolved over time as well. So I think that's also, because that rapid feedback from our users before production, we get a lot, we get so much rich data from that.
That kind of brings me into where I want to, okay, go ahead, Paul, I'll jump in after you, go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, I don't know if you and Mitch, I'm sure Mitch remembers this, but one of the things I wound up doing back at that network security company we worked for was putting together click-through prototypes, because there was really no other way to actually show people how the actual interaction design works. Before that, it was just sort of, it's just wireframe by wireframe, or even a hi-fi sort of screenshot or design, that sort of thing, you really never got a feeling for the interaction design. So I wound up writing, a ton of JavaScript so I could actually show people how the interaction works, not just, and I could actually usability test right off that before it ever went into development. And now we have things like Figma and Envision and stuff, which are absolutely wonderful. But it took a lot of work back then to, get those actually interactive.
I remember that.
I do too.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about, though, accessibility and usability in the age of DevOps, which is, we're DevOps Unbound here, right? And so, I mean, there's good and bad. I think, Sean, you nailed it. The good is, hey man, we're doing usability and accessibility testing pre-deployment as part of our design, which is a lot better than feedback loops, but going back to go every time, right? But on the other hand, when you're changing your application and potentially your UI, making little changes, even if they're just little changes, 10 times a day or 100 times a day, sometimes what was fixed can get broken. Or, you could do I call it the DevOps cha-cha, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And, how do we do that? How do we account for that in our usability and design in a DevOps world like that? Paula?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important to start having an accessible site really early on, right? So like at the beginning of your site, like the beginning of your company, if you invest in accessibility, you can really avoid these mistakes. The reason being that like all of the code examples from before will already have been accessible. The reason being that like the design systems that you put in place will already be accessible. And so when you design something new and you iterate on it, like you're taking design elements that are already accessible, right? Like really investing at the beginning is, I think, the best way to really kind of fight against this.
Paul or Sean? Or
yeah,
Rich?
I wholeheartedly agree to that. And I think the best way to design, to invest up front is to make it into your design pattern library. So basically it's kind of creating that common set of reusable components, code components and design components. And hopefully most of the design changes are just rearranging those components or those Lego bricks, right? But if each brick has accessibility baked into it, that doesn't break the code in terms of accessibility. So I think that's probably the best way to solve it. It's also probably one of the most difficult, and just because you have to do that up front, right? You have to do that. You have to make your design pattern library up front. You have to maintain that code base. But once you actually have that set up, it just makes development so much faster anyway. So it's actually a win-win for everybody, for accessibility and for developers.
Mitchell, Paul, anything?
Yeah, one thing, I'm relatively new to my company as well, so I'm trying to introduce quite a bit, including we're creating our own design system right now. But one of the things I want to introduce, and I don't have any results of this, but I really want to educate our testers, our QA people, very much on how to test a site or a product for accessibility. Doing things with a keyboard and putting your mouse away and those sorts of things. So I think if we do a lot more of that, and they kind of do regression testing in that way, at least once in a while, we can ensure accessibility quite a bit more as well.
Sure. Yeah, that is a good point. And that does bring me to another point, which is you can also kind of bake it into your development process in terms of linting. So there's a lot of really great linters out there. For example, for JSX, there's JSX-A11Y. And if you don't know, accessibility is often abbreviated as A11Y. And so that'll stop you from making mistakes early on. And to Paul's point about testing, I mean, yeah, accessibility can actually be baked into like your testing process. Your end-to-end tests, can run after you push to your master or primary branch, and they can test accessibility as well. There's a lot of tools out there for making that possible. For example, PA11Y can help you do that. You can then go ahead and monitor that in something like Datadog. So similar to how you monitor other things that can break in your code, you can monitor accessibility and consider it a regression or a bug when something breaks and catch that before you go to production.
One of the things I'm curious about is the acceptance of usability design, usability testing by the developer community, DevOps community, how much has that improved? Is it now, security people struggle with, okay, let's shift left and get security built into the application more, but you've been at this a lot longer. What's the acceptance like now by software teams and people leading development?
My experience is it varies a lot. It depends on the particular personnel involved. One of the things I found that's really helped is in the design system I'm putting together, I put a lot of rationale in there. I don't just give people specs and say, follow this. I don't take any kind of draconian approach to any of it. In fact, I want a lot of feedback, and I've baked in, I put a lot of their feedback, including from engineers, back into the design system itself. But explaining the rationale of why are we doing things this way, and even if they don't fully, even if they don't fully read the site and go through it in detail, giving presentations about here's why we do the things we do. And I can tell you a lot of engineers really appreciate that. They love, or developers, they love knowing why they're going through the pains of doing some of these things. And they see the rationale, and then they see it developed, and they see that, oh yeah, this is so much easier to use. And I've seen a lot of that. There are others who are a little more resistant to such things. It's just a little bit individual in that respect.
Absolutely. Hey, Sean, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Oh no, okay.
We know you're only there 3 months, but talk to us. What does Tricentis have built into their testing, solutions for accessibility, usability testing? Is that something Tricentis plays in, or are you dealing more with how to build that into the actual Tricentis products?
So yeah, so my vantage point is more of how to build it into the product. So we're looking at ways to kind of standardize our look and feel in our UI, right? And as part of that, even before we start making the very first sketch file to represent what those components look like, we need to bake in what the accessibility requirements are. So I'm looking at it from that perspective.
Got it. So guys, we haven't really mentioned COVID much, right? And we can't do it's always the elephant in the room in 2020. How has the pandemic, people working from home, everything that comes out of this nightmare of a situation, how has that had any effect on usability, accessibility at all?
Oh, from my standpoint, it's helped. This is the one silver lining of this whole storm of COVID. It's I think it's just making people more inherently empathetic because they've been experiencing the pain of remote tools not being up to snuff, for example. And I think that it's giving people a different mindset for others. And it's exposed a lot of holes in like our the way that we think about things, right? And that's forced people to think about others in a way that they haven't before. So I've noticed there's actually been a lot more enthusiasm, a lot more support, and a lot more proactive discussion about accessibility and inclusive design, for that matter, because of COVID.
Absolutely. Paul, any thoughts?
I think that's a great point. I think to add to that, I think a lot of people are doing things online that they were doing in person before. Like I know my grandparents are shopping online when they would shop in person before. And I don't have any data to actually support this, but I imagine that that's definitely driven the desire to have accessible websites.
In a sense, we've been sort of lucky in that we're a global company. So we do so much work together online that I feel very fortunate that I work for this company, because the transition has actually been relatively simple. It's for most of us, it's actually helped because we just get so much more work done. But we already had so many tools in place for working with each other, but we're even discovering more. Like I'm putting together a thing called a feedback workshop where you have online post-it notes, and while you're giving a design presentation, everybody just sort of stays quiet and they write down their notes, and then we sort of put them into buckets and we talk about them later. And we actually get through design reviews much more quickly. And it's mainly because we're not doing these things in person. We've never thought about doing it this way.
Yeah, no, I get it. Last subject, because we're running low on time. My experience, and then I've been in the technology business 30 years, is that a lot of times things like accessibility, usability, quite frankly, even security are not afterthoughts, but bolted on after the fact. They're not built into that design from the get-go. And we're in an age now where we're seeing, like, for instance, Kubernetes cloud native infrastructure, right? For deployments really kind of be the de facto standard. But it's always my experience that, deployment tools for Kubernetes, or whatever the latest, greatest fad or, trends are, it takes a little while for accessibility, usability to catch up to those latest and greatest things. Are we, because of some of the stuff we've spoken about here today, will we avoid that pitfall with the latest crop of technologies that we're using, right? So has accessibility, usability become so mainstream that we build it in from the get-go? Sean, that's a big part of your mission, I bet, at Tricentis. What do you think?
It really is, and not to oversell it, but I think that a lot of successful companies are building it in right where it's expected. And I've seen a lot of companies that haven't done that take that old approach to kind of bolting it on right. I've seen them kind of fall by the wayside. So just through kind of like the process of natural selection and how companies evolve and how they grow revenue over time, the companies that do actually build it in are the successful ones. So I think, yeah.
No, that's fair. Paul, go ahead.
I totally agree with that. And I just to add to that, I just think the marketplace now is one where people expect it. It's no longer a desire to have usability and user experience built in. It's an expectation. And if you don't build it in, especially right away, you're very likely to fail.
Actually, Paul, I'm trying to do something else too. It's like, I know that whenever I interview new designers, for example, right, I think what we're seeing as well is that a lot of people, a lot of designers especially, are really socially conscious, right? And just nuts and bolts trying to recruit for new talent and so forth. If you don't have accessibility baked into your process, or you don't have a position on it, it is really hard to recruit design talent because of it. So, I mean, I'm not saying that's the reason to do accessibility, but definitely if you don't do it, that's one of the benefits of, or that's one of the drawbacks of not having it, is that you can't recruit the talent needed to make the great designs of your products in the first place.
Excellent. Paula?
Yeah, no, I agree with all of that. I'm not sure whether or not the new crop of technology will necessarily mean that it'll be accessible from the get-go. There's still a lot of barriers to this. It's not invested in. I think we're starting to understand why we should invest in accessibility more. But there's still an overwhelming percentage of the internet which is not accessible, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, I do think there is a trend towards more accessible, and like Paul said, right, a lot of people are much more socially conscious now, and that definitely helps. And to Sean's point, it's important to hire, like, a lot of people who are getting hired nowadays care about accessibility. So yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
hey, Mitchell, you want to take? I was going to say take the last word here.
Going to jump in and say there's one universal skill every software user has, and that's to sniff out bad software. And we live in a world of choice. We have tons of choices. Think about all the apps for your phone, on your phone. It's no longer it's Word for word processing, right, or for documents. You have tons of choices, and people have options. And I think that that's not something that the business side of the house understands, of why great design, it's not just good design, it's great design. People choose and build loyalty with companies like Apple, because they have such loyalty to their design standards and the accessibility, usability of their products. They really like that. And that can be a major differentiator. I also want to share one other thought, to kind of a future thing to think about, that I'm concerned about, that we don't understand much yet about COVID, and that's the impact, the neurological impact to individuals, because there apparently is some residual impact to some people who have COVID. And that may be with us for a long time. We don't know if it's temporary or if it's the longevity of it. But we could have a society of large numbers of people that have some level of impact from that. And that could be a lasting impact of COVID that we need to design more effectively for those kinds of situations for end users. Let's hope not. But if it is, I think it's something we have to take extremely seriously.
Agreed. Listen, Sean, Paul, Paula, thanks for joining Mitchell and I on this episode of DevOps Unbound. I think it's been a great discussion around usability and accessibility. We're going to revisit it again in the future, and we'd love for you to come join us. But we're going to have to call an end to this DevOps Unbound episode. Thank you all for watching. We hope you enjoyed it. DevOps Unbound, past episodes, our monthly roundtables, even the audio-only podcast versions of these are all available at devopsunbound.com. So you can go there to see the whole collection and take your pick of which ones you'd like to experience. Guys, thanks very much. This is Alan Schimmel for DevOps Unbound. Many thanks to Tricentis for sponsoring our DevOps Unbound series. We'll be back. Actually, we have a great roundtable coming up, Mitchell, this month.
We do.
And we have another show we'll be on in 2 weeks. Thanks very much, everyone. Have a great day. Next up, we're going to go to our Chief Content Officer and Managing Editor, Charlene O'Hanlon. Charlene has the news from around the MediaOps site, quick webinar preview of our shortened week of webinars, as well as an interview with Chris Kennedy of Attack IQ about ransomware and how it affects cyber insurance, actually. It's a different little article, a different angle on the ransomware problem. After that, let's go to Charlene, and I'll be back after that to tell you more.
Hey everybody, happy Monday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here with the Monday edition of the news headlines. First up on DevOps.com, we have an article that recaps a DevSecOps panel from last week's KubeCon and Cloud Native Con North America. That conference happened virtually, as all of them do these days. And we've been talking about DevSecOps for a while now, but it's really still taking baby steps in the real world. So this panel was comprised of some leaders from the DevSecOps space, from organizations including the NSA, Cisco, HPE, Gitpod, and the U.S. Air Force. And they shared their experiences in adopting DevSecOps and their lessons learned. Among their insights, transparent tooling automation, making security adherence a natural part of the process, and a new wave of security-aware employees will be critical components in the future era of DevSecOps. We also have an article that looks at why building your own AI ops platform is a bad idea. I would say the same thing about housework. I mean, really, why do it when you can get someone else to? Constructing or gathering the components necessary for a comprehensive platform is a lot more difficult than scrubbing the tub or vacuuming the rug, though. Still, the prevalence of open source AI tools and frameworks make it tempting for some organizations to build their own. So this article takes a look at why in-house developed AI projects are risky and why, at least in this early stage of AI ops, a pre-built platform is a better way to go, especially if you're looking for ROI quickly, and who isn't really? In news, Gravitational has changed its name to Teleport and released the Teleport Unified Access Plane, an open source security gateway. It is a single binary that acts as a proxy for remotely accessing Linux servers and Kubernetes clusters, and it gives engineers single login access only to the IT resources they have permission to access. Access control is becoming a bigger issue as the IT environment grows more complex with different systems. Teleport is providing a way to streamline access management across servers, clusters, and databases. Over on Container Journal, we take a look at the results of a CNCF survey that shows that there is definitely a growing reliance on Kubernetes and containers. The survey was offered up at the recent KubeCon Cloud Native Con virtual summit that I talked about earlier. And the survey showed that, in fact, 92% of respondents are now running containers in production environments, and 83% of those are employing Kubernetes in those environments. Stateful container application adoption is growing also, according to the survey results, and showing that organizations are moving beyond only running stateless applications on containers and Kubernetes. But while the adoption of the technology is maturing, the size of the IT environment is holding steady. 81% of respondents said they are also using more than 20 virtual or physical machines in their container environments, which is about the same as last year. There are lots of other interesting statistics in the report and the article, so rather than me spoiling the fun, I suggest you take a look at the article to get a feel for how the containers and Kubernetes landscape is shaping up in IT environments. Okay, moving on to Security Boulevard. We have an article that looks at how organizations need to maintain governance and security in multi-tool environments. The massive shift to hybrid cloud architectures means that enterprises are choosing a multi-tools approach to IT. That best-of-breed tools approach helps them meet evolving user needs and capitalize on the agility and scalability that hybrid cloud promises, but having tools spread out across different environments can pose security and governance challenges. This article takes a look at some of the issues that revolve around multi-tool environments and how a dynamic abstraction layer in cloud management platforms can help organizations achieve visibility, security, and governance in their hybrid cloud environments. It's an interesting take on a very real problem in the hybrid IT space in general. And as security is becoming even more critical almost on a daily basis, it may be a simple answer to a complex IT issue. And now that the presidential election is mostly in the rearview mirror here in the US, we have an article that looks at why online voting still isn't possible here in the States. As the pandemic forced us all to do pretty much everything from home, working, shopping, educating our kids, trying to stay fit, the noise around online voting started to rise. But since we're doing everything else from the safety of our living room couch, why not voting? This article takes a look at 3 reasons why we can now order a case of wine online, but we can't cast our ballots. You think the accusations of voter fraud are loud now? Can you imagine what they'd sound like if the election was held online? This, people, is why we can't have nice things. All right. That's it for today's edition of the news headlines. Check back tomorrow when I'll have a fresh batch for you. Until then, have a great day and please stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am here now with Chris Kennedy, who is the CISO at Attack IQ. Chris, thanks so much for taking the time and talking with me today. Appreciate it.
Oh, glad to be here, Charlene.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about Attack IQ.
Sure. Attack IQ is the leading independent breach and attack simulation platform. We now live in a world of technical complexity where managing your own security program can be difficult to demonstrate with evidence and logic, the capabilities of it, and is it mature and efficient and effective. And so we focus on delivering a platform using a framework known as MITRE ATT&CK, which is an adversary emulation framework, to use this automation platform to test continuously your security controls that you've made these investments in so you can show the return. Are they actually performing as you expect? A very powerful new capability in that it allows an organization to really step back, think about, and mature its organization through proving the investments are good and worthwhile.
So I imagine your technology is very sought after in general, but there's so many things happening in the cybersecurity space. I mean, there's always a lot of stuff happening in the cybersecurity space, but if you pile on the pandemic and you pile on the political unrest and the recent presidential elections and just kind of throw it in, it's like this mulligan stew of cybersecurity, opportunity for hackers and malicious actors. So let's dive into that mulligan stew and talk a little bit about, what you guys are seeing in the space, and specifically, A, as it relates to the pandemic, and then B, as it relates to kind of the unrest that's happening out there, with nation states and their efforts to kind of undermine, infrastructure, the political election. I mean, whatever it is that the attack surface du jour, or the opportunity du jour.
I tell you, I've seen a lot. 25 years of being a security operator, from being one of the Marine Corps' first cybersecurity officers to building a cyber defense program at the Department of Treasury, and working at the largest hedge fund in the world. I've kind of seen it all. But the reality is, what I have learned through my career is that as sophisticated as the attackers get, they're still using the same playbooks. And that's why I'm a big fan of what MITRE's built with the attack framework, is that it shows what the playbook is, and it exposes the commodity technologies and approaches that these attackers take. And guess what? They're still successful. They're still working. Ransomware isn't new. It's spear phishing, which we've known about for 20 years, taking advantage of some 0-day or some known exploit, then laterally moving through your environment to encrypt, identify data and encrypt it, and then communicate back out using known command and control channels. So, ransomware being one of the most prevalent attack vectors that we see in terms of growth, at the same time, it's successful because people are paying the bill. It's easier to not be held hostage and clean up. Like City of Baltimore is a great example of ransomware, where we don't negotiate with terrorists, we won't be held hostage philosophy, cost them millions of dollars for something that could have cost them $15,000. So that's a really interesting case study. There's all kinds of other emergent attacks as we've moved to as-a-service platforms for so much of what we do. Everything about security is embedded in your configuration and your credentials. And so things like credential stuffing attacks are on the rise. Basically, if you reuse a password all over the place, inevitably that password gets compromised somewhere. And because of that reuse, everything else becomes compromised.
Right.
And so that's particularly interesting and dangerous. I think business email compromise is on the rise. That's the Nigerian Prince scam that has more social engineering wrappers around it. So what is old is new again. The sophistication bar is increasing incrementally. But I think, and what I'm particularly proud about what we do at Attack IQ is that the reality is, because of this continuous pressure of cybersecurity attacks, we've not done a good job of making sure what we do to protect ourselves is actually working well. A couple of very interesting anecdotes that are connected to that is that for 3 years in a row, a great report is published by Verizon called the Verizon Data Breach Incident Report. And they said 80 to 83% over the last 3 years of all breaches they've analyzed could have been prevented. And that means that the organization had all the people, process, and technology to stop the breach. Something broke somewhere in the ecosystem. That's an outcome of not having good validation in place. We just divide this stuff and assume that it works and that people are trained and people know what they're doing. And the only way we actually do get validation is through our compliance remits, our audits, and our once a year pen test. And that's just not good enough. And
sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say, do you think a lot of that has to do, though, with the fact that it seems to me kind of it's a culture issue for a lot of organizations. Like, you go into an organization and they have the most up-to-date technology, they have security analysts, they have people screaming security every single day, but the end of the day, people walk around going, well, security's not my job. I have a whole security department. I've got the technology on my machine. I should not have to worry about security. Yeah. And I wonder if that's basically what's broken with cybersecurity these days.
Interesting perspective, Charlene. And I, in many ways, I do agree with you in that security is everyone's responsibility. You get on the train, you see the "see something, say something" ad from DHS to remind you of that as a citizen. And the same applies as an organizational steward, employee of the company, and that security mindset matters within the person. It's the security department's job to define the rules, to understand the risk tolerance of the organization from the people that manage the company, and then make sure that we orchestrate a strong program to ensure and enforce that risk tolerance is being upheld. But I also agree with you that buying technology isn't security. Buying a security technology isn't security either. It's about understanding what threats you intend for that technology to mitigate against. And I unfortunately believe that, like for 20 years in the industry, we have bought products based on fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and not without a mindful knowledge of exactly what we want that technology to defend against us. So that's a problem, and I think that's coming to light. MITRE ATT&CK is helping us understand that these are commodity threats. We can pinpoint piece by piece each tactic and procedure the attacker may take. Mm-hmm. And then all the way down to employee training and what it means to be a good steward of cybersecurity, see something, say something attitudes in the environment, and ask to understand how security should be working. Because the reality is security is a cost center for most organizations.
Right.
And as a light bill within the organization, it needs to be a business enabler. It needs to be frictionless as possible. It needs to allow the business to do what it needs to do. And the COVID is a great example of major organizations finding out that their business continuity plans weren't as effective as they needed to be, that their security processes and procedures broke because they made major organizational pivots when they sent everyone to home and able to remote work, and all of a sudden they couldn't have the visibility about cybersecurity activities that they used to have.
Right.
And so it shows that cybersecurity has to be an inherent part of the fabric and rubric of the organization to enable the business, not just that department on the side that deals with vulnerabilities you call when there's an incident, or tells you what your key risks are.
So I want to talk a little bit about ransomware. You mentioned it at the beginning of our conversation, and the Baltimore case in particular. And I've been hearing a lot about it, and a lot of folks are saying, well, there's value on both sides to pay or not to pay the ransom. So, there's the argument that if you pay, you're basically, funding cyber criminal activities. It opens the organization up for the possibility of another ransomware attack because now you're an easy target. But to your point, sometimes, work's got to get done. So, how can an organization decide whether, it's a tough question to ask, and I know it's an even tougher question to answer, but, what do they need to keep in mind when, if they do get hit, to pay or not to pay? What do they need to consider?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I get first and foremost, let's talk about what cyber insurance is intended for. This is a post-fail security control in the CISO lexicon. As in, if your security program is largely biased towards insurance will cover that, then you're already set up for failure. So that's a really important thing to be thinking about and why you have cyber insurance. It's intended to cover cleanup activities like paying the ransom, removing malware, and restoring service. It does not pay for lost intellectual property, lost reputation damage, things like that. So those are really important factors when you're considering using cyber insurance. Then to your direct question of what should a person consider? Well, I guess first and foremost, the reason why ransomware has been successful is because a lot of people are paying. It can be expensive to clean up. Alternatives to paying cyber insurance is that you often have to have a third-party provider that knows and understands the strain of ransomware, if you will, and the mechanisms behind it, and the potential organizations behind it to advise you on this organization is clean, if you will, and they'll unlock you. Like if you pay, they will actually give you the key so you can unlock your data. And or as opposed to paying, we may have a method or a way to unlock your data because we've reverse engineered that strain of ransomware, know the code algorithm that goes into the key and can give you that. But that comes at a cost too. And so you have to make a trade-off, and you have to do it pretty quickly because you got to remember in that moment, your business is down, potentially not making money. And so if you're not pre-gamed on this, if you haven't already planned for a ransomware attack, if you haven't already exercised what you would do in your incident response plans and strategies when that day comes, it's really hard. And what's happened is I think there's a lot of people that are there that haven't gotten there. And so the easy button to get the business back on track is to pay.
So I'm wondering then with organizations that end up paying, obviously the Treasury Department has offered guidance on ransomware, what to do. And obviously their advice is don't pay it. Otherwise you could be, again, funding cyber criminal activities, including possible terrorist groups. But again, I've also heard that, maybe they'll take a blind eye if you end up paying the ransom. They're not going to come after you, basically, is what I've heard. Anecdotally, do not take that to the bank, anybody. But that's what I've heard.
Yeah, well, that's a really interesting thing that just happened a couple of months ago. The Office of Foreign Asset Control actually issued kind of a warning advisory that if you pay for a ransomware attack, you could be potentially fined as a financial institution, for example.
Right.
And so that's kind of counterintuitive, because if you're a victim of ransomware, you basically got mugged. And the only way to get out of the mugging is to give the mugger the money in your wallet. And if you do that, then you would have to pay a fine to do that. And as opposed to hope that some other organization can help you. So that's a really difficult situation to put people in, but it also tells you the state of affairs in terms of the risk of ransomware today. The fact that Treasury is advising means that ransomware is working. There's a significant flow of money out of the United States to ransomware attackers, and so much so that it's got national level attention and advice, and now coming with it potential legislation and fines for people that comply with it. I don't know what to do about that. I think that's a really terrible place to put a business to have to deal with that. And so my advice would ask specifically about, like, what do I do here, is be ready. It's kind of to the point of what we were talking about a second ago. It's one part ransomware isn't new. It takes advantage of pretty known commodity exploits and pretty known commodity attack techniques that attackers use. Attack IQ offers an attack simulation platform. You can exercise ransomware behaviors, so you can hopefully, if and when that day comes, you can contain it quickly because you've exercised appropriately. Incident response plans really matter. Like, you got to think about how you're going to deal with this and have that, ready to go and staged. And having support providers on staff isn't a terrible suggestion if you're really worried about ransomware attacks and affecting your business.
Yeah. Well, I think it's kind of a sad state of affairs that we've actually gotten to this point where ransomware is a thing that we all have to kind of be concerned about. But, obviously, since we've got workforces that are all working remotely now, it becomes an even greater issue, because a lot of that perimeter security within the corporate networks, is just not available for a lot of remote workers. So I imagine there's going to have to be some rethinking of security strategies and security technologies to support a fully remote workforce, no matter where they are, and ensure that they have the proper, not only the proper technology, but the proper education as well, to understand what is and what is not acceptable within today's it's a dangerous landscape out there. So I expect that we're going to see a lot of changes in the security posture of a lot of organizations as we go forward, especially if the pandemic rages on longer than I think we all expected it to.
Yeah, I say that I think that you've already started to see that, especially with larger scale enterprise organizations that have had to move 6 figures of workforce to almost exclusively remote work. Sensitive organizations that operate insider threat programs, and they put people in buildings so they can better manage what that means in terms of surveillance and monitoring and things like that. That's now changing. That's more difficult to do when people are remote. Those are big implications. the big risk I see today, and specifically to the pandemic and like ransomware being connected to that, is that when you move to this kind of model, the kinds of changes that you put in place, inhibiting people that normally would inhibit people or segment off parts of the network and things like that, may not follow to this new model, which then all of a sudden takes a person that's a home-based employee and has access to things that they normally wouldn't, because you rush that out the door, and then now that person gets exposed to ransomware, and that person's a bigger risk to the organization and how that ransomware would operate in the environment because of those changes. And so these are all things I know, my peers in the community are thinking about, like, I've got to unlock the business, I've got to get people back working again. This is a hard set of configurations to enable. I've got to swing a bunch of stuff around. And that's what's been the priority of the security teams that I work with closely in the last 6 months is, with these pivots, how do I then refactor my security monitoring and security defensive capabilities to protect against these types of threats in that new model?
Yeah, and not only that, but understanding the threats that are prevalent in a home working environment. You've got a lot of times an open Wi-Fi network or one that is connected with IoT devices and smart home devices and other things that just increase that attack vector. Plus you got the whole family and they're gaming and this and that. It's like, it's a tough. It's all of a sudden you've multiplied, you've expanded that threat surface, and that's got to be a real tough thing for security professionals to have to manage. Because all of a sudden you're the IT department or the security department for an employee's entire family, basically, in addition to just the.
That's right.
So, I don't envy folks in the security space in general, and I certainly don't envy where they are right now with the pandemic and all of the threats that are emerging because of it. And I know we could go on for hours on this topic, and we didn't even hit some of the high points. Chris, I want to invite you back soon so we can talk some more about ransomware, specifically whether it is going to be considered, if it's not already considered, an act of war, if nation states increasingly are using ransomware to infect and bring down entire infrastructures. So let's circle back and do that, have that conversation another time soon.
Okay. That sounds
okay.
great. Yeah, it's a really interesting topic. I look forward to it.
Yeah, I think it'll be an interesting one as well. All right, but for now, thanks so much for taking the time today. I really do appreciate it.
Sure thing. Sounds great.
All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community: digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
Hey everybody, happy Monday and welcome to the Monday edition of the webinars preview. We have a lot of webinars as always on DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard. We don't actually have any scheduled for this week because of the holiday, Thanksgiving holiday, but we do have a lot starting next week again. So wanted to give you a preview of what's to come in the next week or so. First up is happening Tuesday, December 1st at 11 a.m. Eastern. It is called Leveraging Value Streams for Planning in SAFe and Beyond. It's sponsored by Platora and it's on DevOps.com. This webinar looks at how value stream management superpowers SAFe implementations. That's SAFe, capital S, capital A, capital F, and lowercase e. Takeaways include optimizing agile release trains, value streams, and teams, and value stream along with value stream management, as well as aligning and measuring OKRs and KPIs real time with data from a DevOps tool chain, and how value stream management helps organizations move from managing dependencies to breaking them. Interesting stuff. Next one I have for you is also Tuesday, December 1st. This one is at 1 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com and Security Boulevard. It's called Hotels, Hookups, and Video Conferencing, a top 10 countdown of 2020's worst data breaches. This one I think is going to be really, really interesting. It's sponsored by Sunray Security. And in this webinar, Eric Kodrowski, who is a CISO and Director of Cloud Research at Sunray, will dissect the top 10 notorious cloud data breaches from this year, breaking down how each was caused and how they could have been prevented. He'll also detail the anatomy of each type of data breach, what we can learn, what allowed the data breach to happen in the first place, and the preventative measures that organizations can use to keep their data secure moving forward. Considering this year has been a total dumpster fire, I think this is going to be a really, really fascinating webinar. The last one I want to let you know about today is called DevSecOps, Best Practices for Enterprises. And this one is happening Wednesday, December 2nd at 11 a.m. on Security Boulevard, and it's sponsored by WhiteSource. This webinar features Shari Ibsan of WhiteSource and Brian Dawson of CloudBees, a dynamic duo if ever there was one. And they'll be discussing DevSecOps in all its forms, including why traditional DevOps has shifted, and what this means, who should own security in the age of DevOps, and some best practices to integrate continuous security across the DevOps framework. DevSecOps has been a topic of interest for a lot of organizations, but you know, as with a lot of things, it's easier to talk about than to actually do it. So if you are struggling with your DevSecOps implementations or just kind of getting that value from it, this is one definitely worth checking out for you. All right, this has been the Monday edition of the webinars preview. Please check back tomorrow, and I will have hopefully some other webinars still let you know about that are happening next week. And until then, have a great day. Stay safe.
Thanks, Charlene. Great stuff. Next up, we're going to go to our channel roundup with Mike Vizard. Only one interview today, though, and that's on IBM Container Security with IBM researcher Brandon Lum. Mike, take it away.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw again. We're here with Brandon Lum, who is a researcher at IBM, talking about container security. Brandon, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mike. How are you?
So these container things, they seem to be catching on. I don't know. I thought it was just a fad, but it looks like it's pretty permanent. And here's my big question for you, since you focus on the security aspect of so much of this. Is a containerized application, in your opinion, going to be more secure, less secure, or just differently secure than traditional monolithic applications? What do I need to know about these things from a security perspective?
If I were to choose just one answer to that, I would say it's going to be secure in a different way. I think moving from traditional monolithic applications to containerization has kind of put a different mindset to security. And it's not so much about the mechanisms in which these workloads exist nowadays, but kind of we are seeing a shift into a more agile process. So you have checks whenever you build the application, you're constantly checking, everything's constantly moving, and therefore you have a lot of testing infrastructure in place. And really, this has seen a lot of new innovation in, being able to run test files, being able to have streamlined pipelines, GitOps, and even things like chaos engineering, where you introduce bugs all the time.
When I talk to people, one of the things they like from a security perspective is that I can rip and replace the containers when there's some offending piece of code, and I'm not trying to patch this entire monolithic application. The downside is there seems to be a lot of dependencies between different things, and if any one of those things is compromised, maybe the whole thing is compromised. So, am I trying to strike a balance between those two things, or what's your sense of how big an appetite should I have for microservices and containers and all the other cloud native things?
Yeah, I think that's a trade-off, like you said, with being able to be more agile. What happens when you split monolithic applications into multiple microservices is now the management problem becomes a bit bigger. So this introduces some complexity in terms of how teams manage and how teams talk to each other, because it's not just, different APIs. How do I find where the root of the problem is? But also, these services may now be managed by different teams. They may have different stakeholders. So it can be kind of messy in that sense. But I think what we are seeing is that slowly there's a lot of adaptation into how these work. And with a lot of, we see a lot of monitoring and testing focus in cloud native. And that's kind of what's pushing for being able to better identify, which are the offending components in a huge sea of microservices.
Do you think that this transition to containers, which we're on the path, we're going there no matter what, is that going to force people to embrace DevSecOps more aggressively? Because it seems like there's just no way to kind of manage this process unless I ship security further left into the application development process. Is that what's going to happen? And if so, what's the hard part about making that happen?
I believe that there will be kind of more shifted towards the left. I think it just makes things sometimes a little bit easier, just because from the creation of the application where it's developed all the way when it goes through the multiple different components to the runtime, the way I see it is it kind of loses information as you introduce more things, you do more packaging. And shifting left allows a lot more security analysis to be done. And also now we're seeing, even with GitOps, the metadata for your Kubernetes cluster, or even deploying infrastructure, IAC infrastructure as code, is now also moving to the left. That said, I think that there is, whenever everything is moved to the left, there is a component that comes where we have to introduce checks and controls on the runtime side as well, to ensure that whatever we're doing in shift left is validated on the runtime. And this is where the work with signing and encryption comes in, that we can cryptographically ensure that a certain container that was built an hour ago in this process has gone through the necessary checks.
Right. I mean, it almost seems to me, in my untrained eye here, that I got to secure the containers as I build the images. Then I got to stick them in the runtime, secure the runtime. Then I got to secure the host in which they are running. And then I got to make sure that there were no vulnerabilities discovered after I did all that are affecting my applications that I didn't know about it. Does that kind of sum up the magical DevSecOps process in layman's terms, or what?
Yeah, I think that sums it up pretty well. And I think, this is, if it all goes to plan and we really transition to this new paradigm of computation, right? We like to come up with this example where we say, we treat it more like cattle instead of pets, right? So there are things that come and go, and we hope to be in the future where you see a single node or a single service would not be up for maybe more than an hour or so. Everything's ephemeral, everything's moving, and so as things are constantly spun up and down, as long as we ensure that they reflect what the processes we've gone through, everything will be good.
You just posted a blog with KubeCon last week, and you were talking in there, among other things, about encrypted containers. So what are those exactly? They kind of look like a new animal in the container zoo to me, but how do they work, and is this going to be the default?
Yeah, so encrypted container images is something that I worked on with a couple others coming from IBM research. This was really a push towards securing container images. If as we are seeing more workloads coming in from federal, financial, telco, where the code itself may contain some confidential information, such as trading algorithms or proprietary code. There's a need to ensure that they are confidential. If somewhere down the line between your shift left all the way to the right, everything in the middle, if something goes wrong, we need to make sure that the code isn't compromised. So that's one thing, and also it introduces the ability to be able to do geofencing execution. So for example, if you think about GDPR or any other compliance standard where you say a certain workload has to reside in a certain country or region, we are able to enforce those policies.
There's a lot of talk in the security world now about zero trust architectures. Do you think that lends itself to these distributed containerized application environments that we're putting together? Do those two things need to somehow converge and meld to kind of create the ultimate solution here?
I think the zero trust direction that we've seen in the community is kind of almost a perfect match with cloud native workloads, because they're talking about constantly attesting workloads and giving them new identities everywhere, which kind of matches the container world, where one day my container can be on this machine, but tomorrow is going to be in another region, right? So the idea of zero trust is you're constantly I'm only going to give you identity if I make sure that I am able to verify it, and then I'm going to be able to trust any other workload because I know that there's this engine behind that's giving me this trust in my ecosystem.
How will I approach that trust with microservices? There's a lot of talk about identity, and on this call, we've never met before, but we were able to look each other up. Somebody vouched for you, somebody vouched for me, and we kind of said, okay, this is who we are. Can't we just do that with services and machines and something more sophisticated than maybe two-factor authentication? But how do we get to the point where every logical entity has an identity, and that's how we know who did what to whom?
That's a good question, and surprisingly, the way that computers do it is very much like how we humans do it. It's all based on the age-old idea of public key infrastructure, where we have a certain authority that we trust. The idea here with machines, though, is that with technology, there can be more innovative ways to be able to do this. For example, for you and I, we have biometrics, like our fingerprint, we can look at that. What we see now is there's this extension of attestation down into the hardware. Every machine is built with a TPM or HSM, which is a hardware chip that really is resistant to physical tampering. So the idea is, if I can be able to have something like a fingerprint for the machine, then I will be able to establish the identity in a much stronger way.
All right. Well, short of waiting for the next generation of hardware, last question, what's your best advice to people about container security right now and how they should be thinking about this and approaching it?
I think a good approach is to do as much as you can. I think that there are many things to cover. There are a lot of aspects. We just released cloud native security white paper, which was part of the work from Six Security, is part of CNCF, and there's a lot of ground to cover. But I would say, move fast, do things quickly, and remember to, keep iterating along the way, especially with security. There's always room for improvement.
All right. I think you said there's no shortage for on-the-job training. Hey.
That's how we all do it.
There you go. All right. Hey, Brandon, thanks for being on the show. Enjoyed the chat.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
All right, guys, back to you in the studio.
Next up, we're going to go to the Analyst Corner with Mitch. Mitchell Ashley has some good commentary and video for us, as always. Let's turn things over to him, and I'll be back to wrap up.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Well, the pleasure of being joined today by Ron Benetton, who is GM of Imperva Data Security. Welcome, Ron.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Good to be talking with you. I'm excited to chat a little bit about data security. Let's start out with just to introduce yourself, a little bit of your background. I know you had a recent event with your company and Imperva, and then tell us a little bit about what Imperva does.
Okay, yeah, let me start with what Imperva does. So we're a cybersecurity leader. We have over 6,000 global customers, and we're just focused on helping them protect data and all paths to it. And kind of what that means is we have both application security products and data security products, both of them leading in those spaces. But kind of our view is that in order to do a good job around data security, you really have to look at this as a whole thing. Otherwise, it becomes like a blanket thing, right? You pull it to one direction, you expose yourself on the other side, because data is, it's very complex, and securing all data and all ways that people access data is a difficult thing. So, like, for example, I could be really good at securing access to data from privileged insiders, but then you also get access through the applications. And the way that the data tier looks at things, it doesn't see enough when it's accessed through the application. So that's a problem. And then if you do a good job on the application side, maybe you have bots and APIs, but maybe you also have insiders, and maybe insiders are different when they access it directly, or they're admins of the data tier, or they're admins of the application tier. So really our view is, in order to do a good job, you really need to look at the whole access and all the paths to it.
Excellent.
So how did I get here? So I'm a 30-year data/security guy. So I've been both kind of working on the data side, whether it's a DBA or application side, but also on the security side. So I started my career in the military. I then worked on Wall Street for a while, areas around Sybase and Sybase security, Oracle security. Then I was one of the founders of Guardium back in the early 2000s, built this database security business, got acquired by IBM, was a CTO of data security at IBM for a while, left, founded JSonar, also in the data security space. And then a month ago, got acquired by Imperva, so I now lead the data security business at Imperva.
You just keep getting acquired. I need to hang out with you a little bit more. Going back to Sybase, wow, yeah, I was a Sybase customer.
It's still being used all over the place.
Isn't it amazing? Yeah, technology never goes away.
Never goes away.
We just don't talk about it as much as we used to. Well, data security is such a fascinating topic. And I don't mean this in a pejorative way, but it's a bit like whack-a-mole, right? It's everywhere, and as soon as you think you've kind of got control over it pops up over here. It's sort of like that balloon that squeezes between your fingers. You think you've got your hands around it, and plus it's not a static thing. It's growing, it's evolving, it's being used by different applications in different ways.
We're all security professionals, so to us it looks like a bad thing, but before we go down that route, it's actually a good thing, right? I mean, the fact that it is so complex, it is because it's just hyper efficient, right? The people who are building data architectures are amazing. They're doing an amazing job, because if you look at a data architectures 20 years ago or even 10 years ago compared to what they are today, it's just it's like an immature baby compared to what's happening now. Because and it's a good thing, because these are highly optimized systems, very diverse types of workloads, very diverse technologies, right? A database today is not even close to what it was 20 years ago. A data lake today is an amazing thing. Okay, you know, it's hard to even put your finger on it exactly what it is, a data lake, when you look at, say, an AWS data lake or an Azure data lake or a GCP data lake. They're amazing. So these are good things, right? Our applications are getting better, they're getting faster. We could do like crazy things with machine learning algorithms, doing analysis, telling us how to improve our lives. Okay, now as security people, we're always playing catch up. Okay, we're always these people are creating these things. And security is never exactly baked into that stack, although it is getting a little better. We're trying to get it a little better. So we are playing catch up, and it does create a lot of challenges on what it means to secure it well. So you know, the fundamentals have never really changed, right? There's authentication, there's authorization, there's audit, there's a notion of finding where the data is, classifying. That stuff doesn't change. What does change is the complexity of doing each one of those tasks. So if you look at, you know, even the first thing you kind of need to start looking at is, you know, find all your sensitive data and make a catalog of it and know the lineage. And you know, 40 years we're doing the same thing, and it just gets harder and harder, because you look at one of these data lakes. You know, I think 10 years ago when we were building a data lake or thinking of a data lake, we would think of, okay, we're probably doing some kind of a Hadoop project, okay, which in itself was complex enough as it is, because you've got like 8 or 9 different services running, each one doing something a little different.
It wasn't that long ago.
I mean, it wasn't that long ago, but it's dead, right? It's that part's dead. Now we're building something which is infinitely more complicated, because, like, I'll give you an example. A lot of my customers are building things on AWS. So you got this. It's not like the data lives in one place. Okay, you've got S3 buckets, and then you've got access sometimes from Athena, sometimes through Spectrum, sometimes from both, and then you have some DynamoDB or DocumentDB databases for doing transient things, and then you shove it into Redshift so your Tableau can access it, and then you have AWS Glue moving things around, and maybe you even have a Hadoop stack inside EMR for the landing area.
We have data and databases inside containerized.
Yeah, everywhere. And then you say, well, how do I secure one of these beasts? And so, yeah, it's complicated. It's risky. And we just need to keep up with these guys who are doing a good job with making very innovative architectures. And, you know, it would be great, by the way, if we could have baked this into the stack before they even started. Okay, but like, I'm too old to believe in fairy tales.
Stop chasing that rainbow, right?
Yeah, and we just do need to keep up with them. We need to keep up with them. We need, you know, because a lot of my customers are larger, and if they're larger, then sometimes they're regulated somehow, or they need to adhere to something. And certainly these days, they're all also troubled by all kinds of privacy compliance issues. So we need to give them controls that they're used to getting, you know, on the stuff that they've been building for the last 30 years on-prem. And it gets to a point that the application team wants, you know, they're ready. They finished everything. They're migrating it up. And even simple things, not even complex things like cloud. They have an application using SQL on-prem, and they want to move it to SQL on Azure. Simple enough, right? Not really, because on-prem, they know what their tooling looks like. They know what their controls are. They know what they're doing with privileged access. They know how to scan. They know how to create the policy for defining access. They know how to manage. They know how to do change management around that policy. Now they all move it to the cloud. Sometimes those controls are there. More often they're not there. And so for example, one of the things that we view as being fundamentally important for us is to make that transition seamless. Okay, same controls, different methods, different tools, different policy orchestration, but to them it should look the same. If it looks the same, then when the app team wants to move it over, security stops being this bad guy that says, nope, stop, okay, tell me what you did here. I mean, we can't be the bad guys, okay? We have to,
Can't be the cops, can't be the roadblock.
Yeah, we need to help. We can't keep stopping things. It's just a bad dynamic.
So let me ask you, there's so many dimensions to this and usages of data. So is that one, instead of like getting ahead of all of it and designing it up front, which we wish we always could, doesn't happen. Is that the right approach? Kind of thinking about how do we do security right? Is that creating whether it's the tooling or the framework of the structure of how we secure data, making that consistent? So no matter the environment, we now know how to do it, and we can do it in a reasonably consistent way and know that it's been done, as opposed to, N+1 for every environment that we're in. It's all different and it's all complex, and nobody can keep track of any of it, more or less secure it. Is that sort of getting our hands around this problem?
Yes, that is absolutely like the one sentence summary is exactly that. And
a long sentence, but
a long sentence. Yeah, because we need to abstract things out and hide the complexity, right? We need the fact that the data environment is so complex. It doesn't change that if you go high enough, the problem statement or the what you need to do statement is the same. Okay, the problem is that when you translate it to okay, what actually happens, then it tends to be different here. But at a high enough level, it's exactly the same thing. So, what if the environments are getting more sophisticated and the architectures are getting more complex in a good way, if securing them also gets more complex, then we've lost. So what we need to do is make it maintain a single abstraction layer, and then do the magic that translates it into the individual changes. So it's absolutely what we need to do. Now, some of this is a heterogeneous question. Okay? Some of it is a heterogeneous thing where, you have different silos, and historically, people have always looked at data as a bunch of silos.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there's like the database silos, the big data silo, the file silo. That stuff gets blurred, because in the cloud, it's very blurry, okay? Like, you can definitely say that S3 is a file system, okay? It's an object store. It's kind of like a file system, but then you slap Athena on top of it, and that gives you SQL queries on top of that file store. So is it now a file system, or is it a SQL database? What is that thing? It's
DynamoDB, and now you've got a whole bunch of different ways of accessing and using that data.
So that's one piece of it. The other piece of it, which is almost the same sentence that you said, but semantically it has a different meaning. Okay, if you look at kind of the concept of data governance, okay, from in the last 20 years, it's always been like at the top, there's things like policy and things like, what are the business requirements, and at the bottom, there's the tooling. And always, whenever you talk to anybody in this space, they always say, don't start here. Don't start at the bottom by just implementing tooling. Start here and then do this. Well, I've yet to meet a single company that has started here. You always start here. So
when do you get the luxury, right?
Yeah, look, part of it is just us people, okay? We're us people are problematic, okay? People can understand very concrete things very well, and therefore we can go do a project that does this, and we can do a project that, and the vendor landscape has never helped because products are like this and like this. So, and you go to the analysts, and the analysts say, oh, you need to pick one of these and one of these and one of these. So, for many years, it's been one of these. Okay, nobody started here. Everybody started here, and then projects have operationalization problems. It's not that tools have problems. It's the fact that even if a tool does everything it was supposed to be doing, it gets hard to operationalize things. And then you start looking at it and you say, okay, within these silos, there's actually no difference to operationalize things. It's the same thing, okay? You need the same processes, you need the same decisions, you need the same policy push down. So why are we doing it 6 times? Why are we not doing it 1 time? Well, we're not doing it 1 time because we didn't start here. And so over time, I kind of gave up on people starting here and assumed people will always start here. The question is that abstraction, can you now take work that you've done within any one of those silos and leverage that in order to create that kind of in the middle, like a single control layer. Okay, I mean, a single control layer that then uses those tools, but create something that is, consistent. And if you start creating something that is consistent, then you're not you're not balled into these silos. And then when you get some of these more kind of advanced architectures, you're not screwed because you didn't create something just for this silo and this silo and this silo.
And then that all the bases are covered too. You're not having to do a unique process or solution for all the check marks you've got to put in place, and who knows if those work reliably in every environment, whatever way you figured out to secure the data or do access control or manage data integrity, whatever that is. Yeah. Well, let me ask you, I think maybe other than you getting acquired by Aperva, most of us want to put a checkbox on 2020, kind of wrap it up in in cellophane, put it into a bucket of cement and drop it in the river, let's get past this year and move on to 2020. So as you think forward and getting security right, we're in this COVID era, right? And, that light switch isn't going to turn off any day soon. We're going to be some evolution of this for, whether there's vaccines or not, right? But that is rapidly, seriously accelerated digital transformation projects and changed some things fundamentally about assumptions we make. We can shed some of that evolution, and we're there in many cases. How has that affected your thinking around data security in this era? Because we're in it. We're not heading towards being transformed. We're living it right now.
Yeah, I think this is actually one of the few positive side effects of COVID. I can't tell you how sick I am of being here. I need to go somewhere. I really need to go somewhere. I'm like sick, but
what day is it anyway? I can't figure it out.
Yeah, I just can't even tell you. but the acceleration that this is given to cloud projects is one of the side effects that I think is very positive, because for years, I'm a technology guy, and if it were up to me, everything would be on cloud, bar none, nothing. There would be scorched earth, everything else. And I keep hearing people saying, but it's more expensive. It's more expensive only if you look at it at the actual numbers of the cost you pay the cloud providers. But if you look at how much more effective it is and how much easier, it's like buying super duper IT. Okay, that's really what it's about. It's not about anything else. It's about buying people who know exactly what they're doing, and that you never get to a point that you always have when you build your own stuff where you got people finger pointing, no, it's a storage problem. No, it's a host problem. It just works. Okay. So I think it's great. I think it does create a lot of challenges for security just because it's very new. Okay. It's very new and it's very, very fast. And new doesn't mean it's like 6 months old, but even if it's 6 years old, it's all new. It's like somebody built everything that anybody built around data centers from scratch, really. Okay. Or it looks different, or it's called different. And then the problem, again, going back to people, the problem is always people. So a lot of companies, what they've done in order to accelerate this very, very quickly is they've built a separate security architecture for the cloud group to parallel the cloud architecture group, which is different from the old guys. Okay, so now you get people who understand data security pretty well because they've done it for many, many years. You have people who understand data very well, and then you have people who understand cloud very well, but they're not the same people. Okay, so now you get a skills issue and almost like a language issue. Okay, it's like it's like a Babel again in some respects. It's like, how do you call this? What is this? Is it the same? What's a VPC? How many different ways do you have to connect things into a VPC? What does that impact? My data architecture and what are the flows? And so I do look at 2021 as a great year because, if people have been going at a certain pace into the cloud, it's all accelerated.
I think that is a really important point, because when you've been disrupted, and we all have been disrupted in personal lives, but when you accelerate something that fast, the saying, necessity is the mother of invention. Well, necessity with urgency is like the mother of invention right now. And it's almost like you can't do things the way you've been doing. You can't go along in parallel paths because suddenly we're all now here. We're all in the cloud together, or in a place that's much different than we were. Do you think that is enough of an accelerant to get sort of those silos of people across cloud security and on-prem security, and those start to work together of thinking how we manage, because so much more of it now is moved to the cloud? Or is that a good assumption? I mean, tell me what your thoughts are.
It's because it's people. I don't know how to answer that. We're getting into the realms of psychology more than anything, but I can tell you that it's good. It's got to happen, and we're going to make mistakes, right? As an industry, we're going to do this. It's good that we're doing it, and we're going to make more mistakes because it's less known, because we don't always have the right skills, and I think it's our job. Our job in the industry is to try to reduce those mistakes. Because mistakes lead to things that we don't want to happen, and we do have the ability to avoid mistakes. Okay, we just need to be very clear. We can't be like super techies about it. Okay, we have to do things that are practical, because what you asked is about human behavior. So really, it's not enough we create technology. We need to create technology that is accessible to people and that people can consume very easily. It's one of the things that kind of in security, I think we're doing a much better job now. And my entire focus is really on this, on making things practical and usable, very often more important than a certain feature function. Okay, it's.
I totally agree with that. Yeah. Well, what I was thinking about is that when you have that disruption, think about choosing productivity tools. How many organizations were debating, we're going to go to Teams, we're going to go to Slack, let's study it for a year. It turns into 2 years, and you finally make a decision. All of a sudden, that decision gets made in 2 weeks or a week or a day, a couple of days. Like, how could you just have to. You're forced to make some decisions and make some changes. What I'm wondering is if you accelerate to the cloud and you have, a framework, an architecture, something like an Imperva that okay, we've solved some of those issues. Let's just solve them for other folks and help each other save some time, right? You don't have to, sure, check me out, validate it. You think this is all the right thing to do, but if you've got to do something quick, we've got a good bit of that problem solved. Seems like you're in a good position from that standpoint.
Yeah, and I do believe so. I think that we started very early with the cloud, and how do you do this well? And so we are in a good position. I also really, you said something about this productivity tools making the decision in 2 weeks, and it's one of my, one of my pet peeves for my entire life has been something. I don't see it changing, by the way, yet, but I really wish it would change. Okay, is this concept of a POC? Okay, where you need something, like go back to your 2 years versus 2 weeks. What does that mean? It means somebody picked without doing a POC, right? Okay,
great. Make a bet, and if it's wrong,
okay, make a bet, and make a bet based on what? You made a bet based on either something that's more usable or very usable, or something that everybody else is using.
To the result. I think that's what it comes down to, right? What is going to get there? That's the quickest understanding. Nothing's going to be perfect. We're going to have issues with whatever we choose.
Yeah.
Right. Of course.
Yeah. And this entire industry forever has been, okay, I can't pick anything until I do a POC. But when I do a POC, I'm actually not even checking what's important because I can't reproduce my production environment. I can't reproduce the load. So I'm just going to test something. Okay, I'll test like really simple things. Can you do this? Can you do that? Which has absolutely no bearing on whether you'll succeed or not. And what I'm starting to see, especially on the cloud, because it's much easier to just look at things, much easier to talk to people, much easier to see what your colleagues are doing, what your peers are doing, is I'm hoping that accelerates things because if we need to do something tomorrow, we're just not going to wait. We're not going to wait 9 months.
So here's what might start to change that behavior. I'm not going to proclaim that it's changed that behavior, but through this COVID experience, using that productivity tool example, guess what? Executives, the non-techies of the company, look at us and say, how come we could make a decision in 2 days when we were going to take 2 years to do it? If we can make that decision in 2 days, I want us to make other decisions quickly. Maybe it's not always 2 days, but we've proven we can make some good decisions under some very difficult conditions and rapidly. Let's exercise and build up that muscle and do that more often than the thing that we debate about forever. So I think there may be some pressure from the business, who's also, by the way, very disruptive. They're having to adjust. They're having to go into defense or offensive mode in the business climate. And they want to be able to experiment very quickly. That's part of what digital transformation is about, right? Try some things, experiment and market, go after, learn quickly, much like we do in the kind of continuous improvement. So that might be the thing that nudges us off of the comfortable stool of let's take 9 months / 2 years to study it and make a decision or run it, do an RFP for everything. I hate RFPs, but just like POCs for you. But maybe that's the thing that tilts it a little bit. I mean, I'm not going to declare success yet, but
I agree. I agree. I think it's it's one. I've been in startups all my life. Okay, so one of the things that is really fundamental when you look at a VC that's investing in a company, they're investing in the people, not in the company.
Exactly.
And the technology, they don't know yet. Okay.
They know you don't have it figured out. Otherwise, somebody else would have done it, right? So your job is to figure it out, but get the right people that can do it.
But they invest a lot of money very quickly. Okay. They don't take 9 months, right? So I believe that, when people look at their partners, who they're going to partner with, they need to look at, what are the founding principles of the company? How much is the company going to care about me? What is it going to do for me? are they going to be there when I need them? And I'm not saying technology is not important, because product is everything, but it's product and the people that stand behind it, and the decisions need to be made also from the business level.
So we're kind of running up against our time here. I'm going to point out this irony, and hopefully you'll come back and talk about it. So you were just talking about investing in people, which is what VCs do. I totally agree with that. And earlier we were talking about, well, the problem we're talking about is human behavior and people, right? So there are conditions of which will drive different behaviors. And hopefully that's something we can explore about data and data security some more. We have you back again soon.
Okay, I'd love that.
Good. Well, Ron, it's been a pleasure. I wish you all the best. Congratulations on the acquisition, and hopefully you'll be able to get out of your 4-brick wall cell there at some point and enjoy the world again. All of us will, but I wish you the best. It's been great talking with you. Great. Thanks for joining us today, folks. We'll talk to you soon.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
Thank you, Mitchell. All right. Well, that's going to call a wrap on Monday, November 23rd, TechStrong TV. We'll be back tomorrow, and that will be our last show of the week, breaking for the Thanksgiving holiday here. There's a lot of COVID out there. If you're traveling for Thanksgiving, do be careful. If you're not traveling, that's okay. Enjoy your Thanksgiving. Take some needed time off from work. We could all use a little break. It's been a long run. And I know we don't have a lot of us don't have a lot to do besides work, but find, even if it's just a walk or a little meditation, whatever, enjoy your holiday. Until we see you next, be safe, be well, be strong, tech strong. This is Alan Schimmel. We're out.